So we here at Proficient are excited to partner with AWS to bring you this workshop and share our thoughts, learnings, and expertise on the exciting and innovative tools offered by AWS, Contact Lens, and Lexbots. This session is being recorded, and I just checked with our co-host, Alex at AWS, and as long as no NDA is discussed by anyone while we go through this workshop, we should be okay to send it out. If anyone brings up a question that reveals any NDA, we will not be able to send out the recording. So just have that caveat in mind. So I have with me today two of my rockstar colleagues, Umair and Rishi. Umair is a senior technical consultant here at Proficient, and he will lead the presentation portion of our workshop today, sharing his expertise and advice from working on many Amazon Connect projects. And Rishi is a technical consultant here at Proficient. He will lead our demonstrations of the tools we will be discussing. And I am the senior technical writer and trainer here at Proficient. I will be rounding out our presentation team today. Again, welcome. We are thrilled that you are here with us, and we sincerely hope that today's workshop gives you some helpful tidbits to bring back to your organizations and leaves you as excited about these tools as we are. So sometimes not everyone who registers attends, or we know that some of you who registered were not able to fill out the pre-survey. So to help us better tailor today's presentation, we'd love it if you could answer this poll, which I'm about to share, so that we can see the experience levels of the group. So the poll should pop up from you. I know some people, or for you, I know some people, if they're joining us with an older version of Zoom, you might not be able to see the poll. But if you can see it, please select the option that works best for you. If you can't see the poll for some reason, go ahead and answer in the chat. That would be great. Again, this will help us know better who we have in the room with us today. Because we're going to be going over so many different concepts today, we want to make sure that we can tailor it as we go to the experience level of the folks in the room. We will have lots of time for questions throughout the presentation today, and depending on the level of the question and the experience of the group we have today, we may dive more deeply into some topics. If questions get pretty deep into the weeds, and as fellow tech folks, we know how that can get, we may offer to connect with you separately or stay late on today's presentation for a deeper dive. Everyone who's on with us has answered. I will end the poll and share the results so we can all see that it looks like those of you in the room, close to half of you have marked yourself as beginners. So you've worked with the console a bit and done some basic contact flow work. We have 7 of you indicated you are in intermediate level, 3 of you are the advanced, and we have 3 of you also who know about Amazon Connect mainly through talking with others. So it looks like, you know, we've got a good chunk of beginner and intermediate folks, which is great. We have designed the presentation today to give you some introductory stuff to really lay the groundwork and give us some context. And then we have some more advanced stuff. So hopefully you're all ready to come along for the ride with us and have some fun with us talking about all of these great tools that we have today. There we go. So here's your agenda for today. We're going to start out with the welcome. And again, these times are in Eastern Standard Time because those of us who are from Proficient on the call are all in that time zone. I apologize if you're from a different time zone. So we'll spend the first 15 minutes on this welcome, which we're doing now. Then we're going to do a quick overview of Amazon Connect and talk about some of the key features, again, to establish that groundwork. Then we'll slide right into contact flows, doing a basic quick overview, and then we're going to talk about some use cases and share some tips and tricks that we've learned over our time working with folks here within our work at Proficient. Then we're going to spend about an hour talking about Contact Lens. We'll do an overview. We'll talk about incorporating that into your contact flows in an artful way. We'll have a nice use case demo, which hopefully you will enjoy, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Then we'll make sure to take a break because we realize this is a long 4 hours. After the break, we'll spend about 75 minutes talking about Lexbots, go into a deep dive with that, have another use case demo, have some more time for Q&A, and then we'll do some final questions and a wrap up at the end. So what we'd love for you to do is to participate as fully as possible for you. We'd love for you to ask questions at any point throughout. You can use the raise hand feature in Zoom and I will call on you. Or if you feel more comfortable, you can type into the chat, that's fine. And you can ask questions at any time, or if you feel more comfortable waiting for the Q&A section of each section, feel free to do that. Again, whatever works for you. And we encourage you, if you'd like to use your camera to do that. I know with us recording, that may not be to your preference, but if you'd like to use your camera, please feel free to do so. So with that sort of laying the groundwork of our expectations, I'm going to move on to a quick note about us here at Proficient. So we here at Proficient are a global digital consultancy, and we work with the world's biggest brands to help them connect with their customers and grow their businesses. As it says here on the slide, we are an APN advanced consulting partner for Amazon Connect. This gives us a unique set of skills that will help accelerate cloud, agent, and customer experience. We take pride in our personal approach to the customer journey, where we help enterprise clients transform and modernize their contact center and CRM experience with platforms like Amazon Connect. And with that small tidbit about who we are, let's look at the objectives for today's workshop. So we have two big goals for you today. The first one has to do with transformation. We hope that you will learn how to transform your Amazon Connect contact center with the power of Contact Lens for Amazon Connect and Amazon Lex bots. And we hope that in our discussion today, you'll learn some tips and tricks and ideas for how to do that. Our second big goal is about insights. We really want to help you increase the depth of your insights and into the quality of customer service experience with a well-designed and strategically implemented AI. We're hoping to help you do, again, both figure out some transformation ideas and some insight ideas. So with that, let's get started. So we're going to start by laying a foundation for the overall discussion today by looking briefly at Amazon Connect and the AWS ecosystem. Hopefully this will be helpful for those of you who are feeling like you're more on the no experience to beginner level. Since we are all somewhat embedded at in Amazon Connect at this point, although as we saw at very different levels, we're not going to go too deeply into this. But I wanted to start with a brief overview of the sandbox in which we're all playing. I'm going to ask folks to mute themselves. Thank you. So we'll start with an introduction to the AWS ecosystem that will help us contextualize Amazon Connect, Contact Lens, and Amazon Lex as entities within the AWS platform. Now let's start with the big picture. AWS is a global platform. It's highly available with several layers of built-in redundancies. It is global in scale in that it covers the surface of the planet with regions and edge locations. And it has a very rich operating system full of built-in services. Using AWS, businesses and organizations can minimize the investment, maintenance, and management overhead for on-prem solutions. They can leverage resources that are highly reliable, always on, and globally available. They can increase productivity by providing the right tools to get the job done. They can heighten security with modern cloud security standards, and they can improve scalability with pay-to-play pricing. So the plethora of tools in the AWS ecosystem allows for reduced management overhead, simplified implementation, and significantly reduced costs versus comparable legacy solutions. At its most basic level, AWS is a platform you can build stuff on and experiment with, things that are outside the realm of possibility in a private data center. And today, we're going to show you how amazingly powerful some of these tools are at improving customer experience and your insights into that experience. So now we're going to focus on one tool in particular, Amazon Connect. So Amazon Connect, which again is just one of the many AWS tools, is a self-service cloud-based contact center service. You don't need to design complicated architecture or deploy servers. You don't need to commit to multi-year contracts, and your agents can answer any calls or chats from web browsers. Getting started is simple, but simple doesn't mean limited. If you are not a technical person, it's not an issue. It's easy to design dynamic contact flows, manage agents, and track performance metrics. Because Amazon Connect is built on AWS, you can easily harness multiple Amazon services from the AWS ecosystem to deliver personalized and unique customer experiences and expand functionality, something that is a lot more involved with other contact center providers. Plus, you can scale up or down in minutes. As you probably know, Amazon Connect is 100% cloud-based. It doesn't require any software downloads, plugins, or hardware. Another differentiator is the dynamic, personal, and natural contact flows you can create with Amazon Connect. And we are going to show you today how to use Lex to do this even better than you may be doing now. In Amazon Connect, each interaction with a customer is what they call a contact. The interaction can be a phone call, a voice contact, a chat, a task, or an automated interaction using a LexBot. Contact flows are like IVR, but they do a lot more than traditional IVR. Contact flows allow you to control and define the customer experience from the minute the call is placed through routing the call all the way to connecting that call to an agent. Another differentiator is the open platform. AWS services offer the ability to enrich your Amazon Connect experience with Lambdas, in addition to using services like DynamoDB, Lex, and Contact Lens, all tools that we're going to talk about today. Another differentiator is the option to leverage AWS partners like Proficient to help you develop proof of concept, manage your services, design effective architecture, and more. So, how big is the AWS ecosystem? Well, it's large and ever expanding. When you open the AWS Management Console, you'll see a ton of services in here. There are 25 service categories and over 100 services. Something to keep in mind is that with AWS services, you can build simple solutions or complex solutions. Some of the services are optional, like Lex, Contact Lens, Lambda, and DynamoDB, all things, again, we'll talk more about later today. And some are integrated, like S3 storage and the directory service. You can add or remove complexity or integrations as you please. And like I said before, you don't have to be a developer to use AWS. So that's a really brief overview of AWS and Amazon Connect. We're ready to dive into contact flows. So contact flows at their very basic are something I believe everyone has dipped their toes into a bit. Today, we're going to dive a bit deeper and share some of the lessons we have learned in helping customers design more effective and well-architectured contact flows. These are contact flows that meet multifaceted business needs and are designed to not only help assist your customers effectively, but also to address the data gathering needs of your business while being easy to understand, update, and maintain over time as your business grows and your needs change. But before we dive into some advanced strategies for contact flows, let's do a quick recap on what contact flows are and the role they play in your Amazon Connect implementation. So contact flows really define the customer experience. They help shepherd your customer, provide an experience that reflects your brand, and should artfully assist your customer in getting their needs met. And there are several types of contact flows, and each is designed to meet specific needs. One of the main features of contact center software is allowing you to create inbound contact flows. These are the IVR flows that customers travel through and make selections in to get routed to the best agents to service them. Amazon Connect lets you create inbound contact flows, but also other types of flows that let you define things like what the customer experiences while waiting in queue before being joined to an agent, the customer queue flow, what the customer hears while they're on hold, the customer hold flow, and what the agent experiences while on hold with a customer, the agent hold flow. Aside from the generic inbound contact flow type where you create the IVR experience, all the flows listed on this slide control different parts of the customer or agent experience. These are how you loop prompts, offer callbacks, apologize for delays, and play music. So now let's dive a little deeper into more advanced contact flow topics. Later during this training, we are going to be covering contact lens for Amazon Connect and integrating Amazon Lexbot interactions into your customer experience. Both of these features can be configured and used in your contact flows using out-of-the-box contact flow blocks. Before we dive into these two features, we wanted to also talk about some of the best practices that we advise our clients on when thinking about building and maintaining their contact flows. Our consultants regularly advise on contact flow implementations of every size and in various sectors. We have a product team that's created a product called PACE, which is Proficient's Amazon Connect Experience. And we're going to show you one of those, the features in that later today. And we've got a designated MSO or Managed Services team that helps support our customers with their Amazon Connect implementations post go live. And we've done lots of workshops and boot camps like these to prepare folks for their Amazon Connect implementations. And we've done personal health checks on their Amazon Connect implementations. So all of these things, all of these experiences have really helped us establish some guidelines on best practices for developing contact flows. And we are really excited to have this opportunity to share some of these best practices with you today. We're also going to highlight a couple specific contact flow blocks to get you thinking about how to get more advanced use out of your contact flows. So at this point, with all of that introduction, thank you for your patience as we went through that. I'm going to hand it over to Umair, who's going to share these best practices and insights with you. So Umair, feel free to unmute yourself and come on in.
Thanks, Laura, for that excellent introduction. Can everybody hear me and see me okay?
Sure can.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to pick up from Laura's excellent presentation here to talk to you about what she was speaking to about contact flow best practices. And as Laura mentioned, our team at Proficient, we work extensively with clients who are looking to create new implementations or update old implementations on Amazon Connect. We also have a managed services offering, so we often troubleshoot issues that arise in different Amazon Connect implementations. And then we also have our own Amazon Connect product, PACE, that Laura had mentioned. And so this is not a sales pitch, but really what we wanted to do here is distill some of the best practices that we have learned as we have worked with contact flows in production environments. And we wanted these to be a set of best practices that you could apply if you are an advanced or intermediate developer who is already very familiar with Amazon Connect, but also if you're just starting out on Amazon Connect and want to start thinking about getting those contact flows production ready. So the first one here will seem pretty obvious to you, but as Laura mentioned in her presentation, there are different types of contact flows that are meant for different parts of the customer interaction. So one of the first important tips that we always have is it's important to ensure that you're creating the right type of contact flow for your use case. We have seen many instances where internal teams have built flows or made assumptions of what sort of flows can be built and then encountered blockers. A best practice that I reiterate for any new developer or old developer in the Amazon Connect space is to always look at the Amazon Connect Administrator Guide. This is a guide that I will show you momentarily after this part of the presentation, but it includes the definitions for all of your different contact flow blocks and also indicates what contact flow types support that block. So it's very important to take that into consideration when you're designing contact flows or developing. The second most important practice is to establish conventions for your contact flows. And what we mean by this is really ensuring that your developers are on the same page about some of the stylistic choices that they might make, or also some of the practices they may implement to ensure better readability. So this could include ensuring things like making sure that things are named consistently, establishing a data dictionary for any custom attributes that you're using in your contact flow, establish processes to ensure that these conventions are consistently used and applied. Make sure your contact flows, for instance, are named in a way that makes sense. It describes the function that they serve or the purpose that they serve. Don't pick names like contact flow number 1 or contact flow number 2. As your implementation lives in production environments, those issues that you create in terms of readability do tend to add up. And this is where we have seen customers trip up once they go live with their implementations, where they haven't, really sat down and made some decisions about how they want to structure and design their contact flows. A big part of this all ties up into this next point, which is to use descriptive naming. So I've already given you an example that when naming contact attributes, which are key value pairs of data that are going to be used in your contact flow, when you're using contact attributes, make sure that they are named descriptively. It makes sense. The name is not confusing. Same goes for the name of the contact flow. Be descriptive and clear. The same idea of descriptive naming is also really important for the overall readability of your contact flows. For example, I was recently brought in to review contact flows that had been designed and developed by someone else. And one thing I noticed was that all the prompts had been named things like, prompt 1, prompt 2, which made it really difficult from just looking at the contact flow to tell what each prompt was doing or saying. Just goes to show that a small tweak like that would have made, a huge difference in ensuring that our prompts, the developers who were coming into the flow at a later date were easily able to read it and understand what was going on. The final 2 points I have on here are, kind of related, and I think they're related to kind of keeping that customer experience in mind first and foremost. And I think what I mean by that is, this means that you really need to ensure that your menus are not overly long. You're not putting customers through unnecessary steps in your IVR. Design your contact flows with a lean customer experience in mind. Minimize the risk that a customer will hang up before their issue is resolved. You can really do this by ensuring that you're not, creating unnecessary menu options, that you're not repeating things that have already happened in the call. It will really allow you to ensure that you keep your customer experience efficient and you keep the customer engaged. And the second part of that is ensuring that you have appropriate error handling and alerting in case something does go wrong in your contact flows. And this is something you should be thinking about right from the start. It may be prudent to even create a separate contact flow so you can transfer from one flow to another flow, which I'll be showing you in a moment. But it's sometimes prudent to create a separate flow for error handling so that you can make sure that those errors are being handled consistently, that your calls are going to an agent. I was recently debugging an issue where we had customers encountering really strange behavior. They were getting routed to a really weird set of agents. It didn't really make sense. And then when we sat down and we looked at the contact flow that they were going through, we realized that there was an API call that was being made in this particular contact flow. And then information from that API call was being used later in the contact flow, but there had been no proper error handling on that first API call. So the call was continuing down the path of the contact flow, and it was unfortunately kind of falling in a really weird way, which had these cascading effects. So, simply doing things like that, making sure that you are thinking about the error conditions on your your contact flow block and ensuring that all of them are getting handled consistently. This also means thinking through the error paths when you're designing and developing your contact flows. For example, if you're making calls to, let's say, a Lambda, which is a serverless service that AWS has to run encapsulated pieces of code from within your contact flows. So you would be using these to do things like make API calls or make data dips. If there is a possibility that that Lambda function may return an error, maybe there's an API error, it's best to try to simulate those errors and then also see what happens to your contact if that error happens in your contact flow. You really want to think through both the happy paths and also the unhappy paths that a customer may go down.
Before you go any further, Mara, it looks like we have someone who's raised their hand. Luis, did you want to unmute and ask a question?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. And first of all, thank you for doing this. My question is regarding the Amazon Connect, the flow, right? I've been dealing with Avaya voice portal for over 15 years. And when we're developing applications that are in OD, we use something called reference node, which allow us to, for example, have one prompt in one place, and we can keep referencing that prompt from other places on the flow without having to cross lines all over the canvas. Is there something like that on Amazon Connect?
Cross lines on the canvas.
Yeah, you know how the arrows are like through, like the flow, and then let's say you have like a really, a big application, but then you have a lot of exit points, and you always play, like a transfer. Like, oh, please wait while we transfer you, for example, right? So in Avaya world, I can just put that recording on the top of my flow, and then on the bottom, I can just put a reference, and it just automatically moves my flow from there up there, without having to cross a line all over my, my flows. Because
I see what you're saying.
Like a developer, I know what I'm doing, but if somebody else is looking at that, they could be overwhelmed with lines everywhere.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So if I may just restate your question and let me know if I'm off base on anything that I'm saying here. You're talking about working with the visual editor for contact flows in a way that prevents, your lines from going kind of like all over the place, especially if you have a really big contact flow, because it's really hard. Yeah, I totally get your question. It's a very common challenge that we see for developers, especially in our practice, when they start building these contact flows that can become quite enormous. So now specifically on the issue of, I'll say two things, and I think they may be related to what you're asking, but I'm not super familiar with the platform that you're talking about. So let's say you want to use a prompt in your contact flow. There is a specific, and so contact flows, as we discussed, consist of different blocks, right? There is a specific block that allows you to play a prompt, right? And let's say you want to play the same prompt in a few different places. If it becomes too kind of complex to keep hitting that same contact flow block, what I will often suggest is to create a separate contact flow block elsewhere in the flow. The nice thing about Amazon Connect is that you can actually have different play prompt blocks, even if they're playing the same prompt. Now, the other thing you kind of alluded to a little bit is the idea of being able to kind of like save something and then be able to come back to it later in the flow. Now, I think how you would do that, Louise, and I'm not sure if this is specific to the system that you're speaking about, is by using contact attributes. So let's say that I make an external call and I retrieve some information, and I now want to save this information and use it later on in my contact flow. And let's say it's just like the name of a prompt that I know to retrieve when I hit a different part in the contact flow. what you can do in a contact flow is set a custom contact attribute, which is essentially a key value pair of information that then persists over the lifetime of the contact. So if you need to then refer back to that value, you can refer back to that same contact attribute that you set by name, and it allows you to pull that value forward. So I'm not sure if that maps exactly to the system that you're speaking to, but I think that's how I would avoid creating that complexity, is either, if it's specifically a contact flow block that you're using multiple times and you're trying to keep routing to it, maybe consider creating that same block elsewhere in the same contact flow, so you're not trying to drag lines all over the place. And if it's a piece of data that you're trying to reference back to, I would suggest using contact attributes, because then you can refer back to them very easily with the key name.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Great question. So this actually plays really well into Louise's question about really working with complex flows, because, it's quite often the case that you're working with, an IVR that's quite complex, right? You may have multiple stages. A customer calls in and we need to collect 3 or 4 pieces of information. And even though Amazon Connect makes it really easy for you to visually design your contact flows with a drag and drop interface where you can easily drag contact flow blocks onto the canvas, it can quickly become quite complex. And so I wanted to highlight a contact flow block that you may not be as familiar with, but can be quite useful in those scenarios where you have a quite complex architecture that you're trying to implement. And the block that I'm specifically speaking about is called the transfer to flows block. So this contact flow block can come in handy, as I said, if you're designing large, complex IVRs, because it allows you to break up your flow into smaller pieces of logic. So in the example that I just gave, let's say we have a customer calling in and we need to collect several pieces of information. If you have a flow, like let's say just for language selection, where we ask them to confirm if they would like to receive service in English or French or Spanish or whatever languages your contact center services in, that could be its own discrete contact flow. And then this particular contact flow block essentially allows you to transfer the flow to continue the IVR experience. What this allows you to do is break your IVR into something that is more readable and easier to consume if you're a developer, by breaking your logic up into smaller pieces of code. Another useful aspect of this approach is that it allows you to reuse contact flow logic across multiple flows. So, the example I just gave was language selection. Let's say you have 2 or 3 different categories of calls that you serve, right? Like let's say sales, customer service, let's just imagine that we have different business experiences, but for all customers, we need to confirm the language of service. This is a great example of how you can really encapsulate and modularize your code so that you can transfer to that flow for language selection and transfer over to your next flow once you're done with language selection. So I'm going to add a word of caution here. When working with complex flows, this enormously helps in terms of trying to break that up and make it more readable, so you're not trying to drag and drop arrows across multiple screens. But the important thing to do here is we have seen customers run into issues when trying to maintain systems like this, especially if the terms around which contact flows should be reused are not well defined. So, ensure that you're documenting the inputs that your contact flow expects and also the outputs for each flow. So if you're building like this, where each flow is going to do its own discrete job, it's really important for you to clearly document what is expected for that flow and what kind of output comes out of that flow. So an example would be, I've seen people accidentally put customers into a bit of a loop because because they kind of transfer from one flow to another, and then to another, and then because of some mistake that they didn't think through properly, the customer then gets routed back to the first flow, which can, as a customer, be a very frustrating experience. So it's really important, if you're using this approach, to break up really large, complex flows, to really talk to your developers about nailing down a process for how you deal with the inputs and outputs. This is another great contact flow block that I want to highlight for you, for specifically getting you thinking about, production uses of your contact flows, and it's the distribute by percentage block. I would say this is one of the lesser known contact flow blocks, if there was like a popularity contest. So I'd love to highlight this for our customers, especially as they think about getting their contact flows into production shape. And the reason I like to highlight this is because, as the name suggests, this contact flow block essentially allows you to essentially flip a coin or roll a dice in your contact flow. Now, what I mean by that is that you basically, it allows you to route customers randomly based on a percentage allocation that you set, and that is directly configurable in your contact flow. So you see a screen capture here of that contact flow block here, where you can see that we're setting a percentage to set, we're sending 50% to one branch with 50% remaining, and then we can add additional percentages totaling to 100%. You could have, for example, roughly 10% of your contacts go down one path, or you could have 90% and then 90% go down the other. The important thing to keep in mind when using this particular widget is that Amazon does not guarantee exact percentage splits. So really what they're doing is they're doing kind of like a coin flip based on that percentage that you have defined. So you're probably thinking, what am I going to use this contact flow block for? And so what I would say to you is that this block is great for A/B testing in your contact flows. And the great thing about it is that it's something that's available out of the box from Amazon Connect for you to use. So you don't have to spend a lot of time building infrastructure to do A/B testing, as I've had to do with some other providers. I've seen this used to great effect to test out, for example, new APIs, or sometimes there's also a desire to test out different versions of prompts or branding, or maybe pilot different versions of changes in contact flows. The list really goes on with this. The great thing about this block is that, like, as I mentioned, it also easily provides you with the easy ability to adjust the percentage of traffic you want to send down each branch. So for instance, I've seen use cases where customers have gradually increased the percentage of callers who are going to a part of the flow in order to load test their new APIs. And so, over a week, they have gradually increased the percentage allocation that is going to the new API, to make sure that they can monitor and ensure that the load that's coming in of callers or chatters is not overwhelming their internal systems. Because of the flexibility of this particular contact flow block, especially with regard to being able to set the percentage directly in the contact flow, I've also seen customers start to think about using this block to route calls in the case of failures. By using this contact flow block as part of their fallback strategy, customers could potentially gain the ability to quickly route callers down alternative branches if there is, for instance, some sort of internal system failure or outage, and they need the quick ability to quickly route people, let's say, to a different number or an emergency queue or something like that. All you would have to do is quickly jump into your contact flow and send people down that other path as your fallback strategy. So those were the two contact flow blocks that I wanted to highlight for you, because I think I wanted to get you thinking about, productionizing your contact flows versus just starting simple. And, you really want to keep these things in mind while you're developing, instead of thinking of them as an afterthought. We are going to open it up for a Q&A, but before we do that, I quickly want to show you something that I was referencing earlier, which is the Amazon Connect Administrator Guide. So just give me one moment here. And I'm just going to pull it up. I want everybody to see this. This is important for developers, new and old, to have some understanding of what the administrator guide is and how useful it can be when you are working in the Amazon Connect space. So Amazon Connect and AWS have this excellent, well-updated administrator guide available on their website. I just clicked on the PDF version. I'm actually going to go back and take you to the HTML version, but you can access both a PDF version and an HTML version of this. You'll see that when the administrator guide loads up, there is quite a bit of data here that's relevant to your development. You'll see that there are topics here that we're going to cover later, such as working with Lexbots or analyzing conversations using contact lens. You'll also see information about some of the newer Amazon Connect features, such as Voice ID and Wisdom. What I wanted to show you here is the section on creating contact flows. You'll see that there is quite a bit of detail here. They explain the different types of contact flows, and then they also provide you with some sample contact flow definitions. But the important part that I wanted to highlight was these contact block definitions. So as I mentioned, for each contact flow block option, there is a detailed guide on how to use it and when you can use it. If you were to click into each of these individually, I'm just going to click on Get Customer Input here. It provides you with information about what the supported channels are here. For instance, this particular contact flow block, for voice, it's supported, and for tasks, it's supported. For chat, there are some special considerations. So it's important to look at these contact block definitions and ensure that you can actually use the block that you're thinking about for the channel that you want to use. And then also, as I mentioned, these contact block definitions explain which contact flow types you can actually use this block in. So for this particular one, you can see you can use this in the inbound contact flow and these additional types of contact flows. And then they also provide you with great guidance on how to configure these blocks, what the different options mean. So this is a great resource for you, whether you're just getting started with Amazon Connect or you are a bit more experienced and just looking for guidance. And with that,
Thanks,
we'll go to our
and so
Q&A.
we've had some questions in the chat, but those of you who are looking at the chat are noticing one of the directors of our business unit here at Proficient, Mattia, has been answering questions in the chat while Umair has been presenting. So for those of you who have asked questions in the chat, your answers should be there. But if anyone has any additional questions at this time, you can feel free to raise your hand in Zoom and unmute yourself, or you can stick them in the chat. Either way, we're doing really great on time, so we've got some good time here for Q&A on what we've presented so far. People are interested.
When you transfer to a different flow, when that flow ends, does it get you back to the place you left before? No, you would have to define what you want to happen at the end of the flow. So that's what I meant when I said, thinking about your inputs and your outputs. If you're splitting your IVR experience into different contact flows, so let's say you have, like a contact flow that just deals with language selection, and it's just a menu for offering the customer the option to select their language. At the end of that contact flow, you need to define what you want to happen to the contact, whether you want to, let's say, hang up on them, which would be a termination event, or do you want to, let's say, transfer them to another flow to continue this experience. So the language example I just gave, where we have a very simple contact flow, where the only purpose of the contact flow is, figuring out what language the customer would like to communicate in. Think of it as the customer comes into the contact flow, we offer them a menu option, they make a DTMF input, we recognize the DTMF input, we set their language, and then we transfer to our next flow. And so we would use that same contact flow block to transfer to the next part of our interaction.
Thanks. Actually, that explanation helps a lot.
Great. Any other questions at all?
And Carl had a question, but Mattia was able to answer that one.
Great. Excellent. Great. If there are no additional questions, Laura, should we move
Yeah.
onward to our contact lens conversation?
Sure, let's forge ahead and yeah, continue to feel free to put questions in the chat and either we'll answer them in the chat or I will bring them up to Amir while he's presenting. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Excellent. So now that we have kind of covered the basics about contact flows and also given you a bit of an introduction to Amazon Connect and contacts generally, the rest of our afternoon today is going to be spent talking about contact lens and Lex. And so we're going to start out by talking about contact lens for Amazon Connect, and then we'll take a bit of a break, as Laura mentioned, and then we will start our Lex presentation. So let's get started talking about what contact lens for Amazon Connect is and how you may harness it for your contact center to proactively manage your contact center and possibly reduce your number of repeat callers. So before we delve into some of these strategies, I want to just briefly cover what contact lens for Amazon Connect is all about. So contact lens is a feature of Amazon Connect that has been generally available since July 2020. And contact lens performs natural language processing. You'll often see the acronym NLP, and that's what it means, natural language processing, and speech to text analytics on your conversation. Contact Lens has a robust feature set. It includes, multi-language support, real-time transcription capabilities, proactive, optional, sensitive data redaction, as well as, the ability to have different configurations in the same environment. So you can have multiple languages being transcribed in the same contact center. And one of the shining features of Contact Lens is the intelligent search capabilities it enables for your contact center supervisors and quality assurance folks. So let's just quickly talk a bit about architecture. I don't want to get too in the weeds about this, but I kind of want you to understand how Contact Lens really works and what's happening. Now, as I mentioned, Contact Lens is a feature of Amazon Connect. So it's not a separate Amazon service. It's a feature that's available to you within Amazon Connect. But under the hood, Contact Lens uses another Amazon service called Amazon Transcribe to transcribe the call. And it then uses Amazon Comprehend to perform NLP, that fun acronym we talked about a few minutes ago, natural language processing on the transcript. So Amazon Transcribe is just converting the speech to text if you're dealing with a voice interaction. And then Amazon Comprehend is trying to perform some understanding or analysis on that transcript. When we advise customers on options for transcription and sentiment analysis in Amazon Connect, we review all of the different available architectural options with them. This will include an analysis of their business requirements, the features available when using Contact Lens versus a more custom option, and also the estimated costs. So much like Amazon Connect, Contact Lens operates on a pay per usage pricing. So you're only paying for the minutes of voice calls that are actually analyzed. For the current pricing, I would suggest going to the Amazon Connect pricing page. I've put some of that pricing information on the screen just so you have a sense of what you're looking at. For Contact Lens, there is a free tier, so definitely look at the definition of that. You do get 90 minutes a month of audio calls with Contact Lens for your first year for free if you just want to try it out and see how it works. And then there is per minute pricing, and then there are also tiers based on how many minutes. So you'll see here that you get a bit of a price break after your first 5 million minutes if you are seeing a very high volume of transcription. So I just showed you a slide where there was Contact Lens, but there were a couple of different other options that were on the screen. So let's quickly just talk about why you would choose contact lens over a more custom or custom design solution for your specific contact center. So the first thing that really stands out to me about contact lens is that it's a no code out of the box feature. It's really easy to use. The feature can be enabled for your Amazon Connect instance literally by selecting a checkbox in your instance configuration, which is something that my colleague Rishi will be showing you. Once enabled, you can easily turn on transcription and analysis by using a contact flow block. There's no code base to maintain, and your administrators can easily set up and update your contact lens configuration directly in your contact flows without any developer experience. The other thing that really stands out for me, though, is that it's really well integrated with the existing Amazon Connect contact search features. So your Amazon Connect instance already provides you with the ability to allow your supervisors and administrators to search through and review contact records. And so let's just pause there for a second. Laura had mentioned that when we're talking about contacts, that could mean a voice call, it could mean a chat, it could mean a task, or it could also mean a Lexbot interaction. Each of these is a interaction or a contact in Amazon Connect. And contact records let you consume basic information about your contact. So when using contact lens, the sentiment analysis results and other information that contact lens is about to glean about your contact are rendered as part of your contact record. The generated transcript is shown right under your recording in the recording and transcript section. And along with the sentiment score for each message, you also get to see, like little visual indicators that show you where the bits of relevant things might be that you really want to hone in and listen in on. So that could be something like, showing you the extended periods of non-talk time in your call, or it could be, showing you the messages where there was a clear negative sentiment from the customer or the agent. It really allows the people who are reviewing your recordings or analyzing your recordings to really hone in on the stuff that is truly important to them. We often hear horror stories from customers about the work that it takes to, have supervisors sift through recordings, because before features like this, it was often a very manual process and involved having to listen to recordings, find the relevant bits, and it was often like searching for a needle in a haystack. Contact Lens builds on the existing Amazon Connect UI to provide your supervisors and administrators with those important insights with the necessary security permissions, which Rishi will be showing you. Supervisors can easily search for analyzed call recordings based on criteria like keywords, sentiment score, and the amount of non-talk time in the call. So in addition to being able to see all that helpful information, they can also search for contacts based on some of this analysis that Contact Lens is going to do for you. So before we talk about some of the other neat features that you can get access to when using Contact Lens, I just flag a couple of quick considerations. So there are regional considerations when using Contact Lens. It's available in certain AWS regions, and obviously they often correlate to the regions where you can have your Amazon Connect instance. You'll see that the key thing here is that if your instance is in the Asia Pacific Singapore region, currently real-time analytics are not supported. For all other regions, you get support for both post-call analytics and real-time analytics. Don't worry too much about those two phrases. I'm going to be spending a few minutes on those in just a minute to explain what that means. But just know that they are different features and there might be impacts. So you really do want to look at what's currently supported in your region. The other important consideration when working with contact lens is the feature set that is available for the language or languages that will be supported by your contact center. This slide shows the languages that are currently supported by contact lens for Amazon Connect, as well as whether post-call analytics and real-time analytics and redaction are currently supported for each language. Since its inception as a feature, we have found that AWS has continually added support for more languages. So it's a good idea to check the link on this slide, which covers the languages currently supported by Amazon Connect, because that would be the latest information. But this screenshot shows you what is currently supported. You'll see that there are a number of different languages for which post-call analytics is available. Real-time analytics, it's a smaller set of languages that have that enabled for them. So you'll see that we have that available for certain English dialects, for French and German, and then some additional languages. And you'll also notice that the sensitive data redaction feature is currently only supported for English language dialects. So an important consideration when you're considering the feature set, as I mentioned, AWS has continually added additional support for more languages. So this is something that may change. Very important to review this when you're designing your contact lens configuration. So, as I mentioned, getting started with your contact lens configuration is very simple. The first thing you need to do is enable contact lens for your Amazon Connect instance. So your Amazon Connect instance is essentially the representation of your contact center. And as you can see in this diagram to the left, we are showing our contact center in the AWS console, where we have an option to click on analytics tools. And within that console, we have a very simple checkbox that allows us to enable contact lens for our contact center. And then you just click save. That's literally it. That's all you need to do to enable contact lens for your contact center in Amazon Connect. Second, once contact lens is enabled, it is necessary for you to enable recording and analytics on a per contact basis. So what I'm saying is, it's not sufficient for you to simply turn on contact lens. It provides you with very granular control over what exactly gets analyzed and what doesn't. And so calls are not recorded and transcribed by default. It's really important for you to know that, and it's really important for you to plan for that when you're developing your contact flows. You can see that we have a screenshot of a contact flow here, and we have highlighted a specific contact flow block, which is meant to indicate one of the ways in which you can set up your contact lens configuration. So the first way here is by using a set recording and analytics behavior contact flow block. And the other way to do it, which is something that is discussed in the Amazon Connect administrator guide documentation, is by setting 2 user-defined contact attributes in your contact flow. We're not going to show you that in great detail today. It is in the documentation, so I would encourage you to go to the administrator guide for that. We will primarily focus on the contact flow block way of configuring this, and so that's what we will show you as part of our demo today. As you will see, the block will allow you to easily configure the language and also the type of analysis that should be performed on your call. And then you also have the option to turn on the sensitive data redaction feature or not. And that's it. That's all you have to do. You have to enable recording, you have to configure your contact lens settings, and you have to publish your contact flow. And once published, any new calls would be transcribed and also analyzed in accordance with your configuration. Now, it's one point that I'm going to leave you with before we move on to the next thing, and this is important, some of the developers in the room might already be familiar with this, or if you've worked with contact flows, this might be something you've already encountered. But in Amazon Connect, every time you transfer a call, and if it's handled by multiple agents, you will need to set up a separate contact flow block for the new contact that gets generated on the transfer. So a concept in Amazon Connect is that a contact represents if there is an agent interaction, it represents a single agent interaction. If one agent transfers a call to a different agent or a different queue, that is a new contact that gets created. So if you want your transfers to be fully recorded, it's really important that when that transfer is happening, you are setting another one of these contact flow blocks to make sure that that part of the recording isn't failed to get analyzed. Very important, again, speaks to the granularity with which you can configure your contact lens configuration. So really important to keep that concept of contact lens being configurable on a per contact basis in mind. So as I alluded in my last slide, you can also enable contact lens using contact attributes. And I'd mentioned contact attributes earlier in our presentation, and Laura did as well. Just to reiterate, they're key value pairs of data about your customer interaction. In contact flows, you can set custom attributes, also known as user-defined attributes. So let's say that a customer comes in, I ask them via DTMF input to confirm what language they want me to service them in. They say English. I can now save a key value pair in my contact persisting that customer's language preference, so that as the interaction proceeds, I can now refer back to that data point in terms of pulling the right prompt based on the right language that the customer has asked for. So a similar concept applies for configuring your contact lens. You can do so by using contact attributes. And again, I would recommend that you look at the documentation on how contact lens can be configured using contact attributes. But I also just wanted to highlight in these screenshots that you can also use contact attributes directly in the contact block as well. So this is our set recording and analytics behavior contact flow block. And here we are enabling contact lens for speech analytics. And then in the language section, you'll see that we have a first radio button to set the language manually. And then we have a second radio button to use one of our custom attributes. And you'll see that here, I'm pulling a user-defined attribute that I had set earlier in my flow called customer language. Again, this doesn't exist by default. This is something that I had set earlier in the interaction that I can now reference by attribute. Similarly, for sensitive data redaction, you can directly configure the contact flow block to indicate whether you want to generate both a redacted and original transcript, or if you only want to generate a redacted transcript. But you can also use a custom attribute. So why would we use attributes versus just setting manually? It just seems like a bunch of additional work. And the answer there is you would use these because you would want to in any situation where you would dynamically want to set your contact lens configuration. The key advantage there is being able to use your contact flow for multiple purposes. So for instance, if you have customers from both customers who speak English and customers who speak Spanish coming into your contact flow, and you would need to transcribe the call in those respective languages, a contact attribute lets you dynamically set your contact lens configuration based on that attribute. So you don't have to drag and drop individual contact flow blocks to manually set the language for each specific language. You can use the same contact flow block for multiple languages. Now, as we have discussed, one of the great things about Contact Lens is that it is integrated with Amazon Connect's existing contact record and search capabilities. And we'll show you that in action in a few minutes. But in order to provide your supervisors or your quality assurance folks with access to the results of Contact Lens, you also need to think about their security profiles having sufficient permissions. So in your Amazon Connect contact center, you create users, and each user is assigned a security profile. And that security profile sets out the permissions that indicate what level of access they're going to have in your Amazon Connect contact center. So Rishi will show you some of the relevant permissions when it comes to contact lens. We have some of those here on the left-hand side in a screenshot. When you're enabling contact lens as a feature, it's important for you to also think about who is going to have access to the artifacts generated by contact lens. You would do this by adding the highlighted permissions in the security profile. And as you'll see, all of these permissions in your security profile are in the metrics and quality tab. So these will allow you to granularly control who can do what with the results that are being generated by contact lens. So when we were looking at the contact flow block and when I was showing you the earlier slides, you'll have noticed that there is an option to select both post-call and real-time analytics. And just to call back to something we discussed earlier, you would want to consider any regional or language-related dependencies when we're thinking about what's available in terms of post-call and real-time analytics. When you configure a contact with post-call analytics, the call recording is only analyzed when the contact has been handled by the agent and the agent has completed their after contact work. This transcript generally tends to be more accurate because it's post-call, there is a bit more time, and once the agent completes the call, and then when they exit the state of having completed their after contact work, contact lens sweeps in, transcribes the call, and makes that available on the contact. You also have the option, though, to configure real-time analytics. And when you configure real-time analytics, Contact Lens will provide you with real-time insights and post-call analytics. Generally, you would be using this feature when there is a use case for it. For instance, if you want to alert supervisors in real time when a customer calls in to cancel their account, which is what we will be seeing in our demo today, this would be a great feature to utilize. In that scenario, we might want to engage the supervisor in real time so that they can provide hands-on coaching to the agent to deal with a difficult call. So really, whether or not you configure post-call analytics or real-time analytics will really depend on if you have any use for real-time insights for this type of call and whether you want to provide any sort of real-time alerting or real-time notification based on what's happening. Also, another important thing to keep in mind is that if you are planning to use Amazon Connect Wisdom, which I'll be talking to you in a few minutes, due to the predictive nature of that feature, real-time transcription and analysis must be enabled for that feature to work. And I'll show you why in a few minutes. But that's basically what you're dealing with when you're working with post-call and real-time. Just to recap, post-call happens after the call is completed. It generally tends to be a bit more accurate than your real-time transcript. When you configure real-time analytics, you're getting both real-time insights, but then you're also getting the post-call analytics. Another optional feature that we've already touched on that we're going to show you in action today is the ability to configure Contact Lens to redact sensitive data from your recordings. The great thing about this is that it uses the predictive nature of Contact Lens to redact information like names, addresses, credit card numbers, and other personally identifying information. This is another aspect of contact lens that requires very little configuration. As you saw in the previous slides, when we have our contact flow block to configure contact lens, there is a button that lets you enable sensitive data redaction as an on-off feature. It is an on-off feature, which means that it is enabled or it's not. The only decision you need to make is whether or not you want to generate both a redacted and original transcript or only a redacted transcript. In both instances, redacted and original audio will be generated for you. As you saw in the last screenshot, this can also be configured using the contact flow block, and Rishi will show you that today as part of the demo. And it can also dynamically be set using contact attributes. We've already covered this, but you can set a contact attribute called redaction underscore option with one of these three values if you want to just control it at the contact attribute level. And as I showed you in the last screenshot, you can also configure your contact flow block to point at some other contact attribute. So this would be really handy, again, if you have dynamic requirements around when when you want to generate just a redacted only transcript and where you want to generate both a redacted and original transcript. If you have any dynamic requirements for that, let's say, for English calls, you want the redacted only. For Spanish calls, you want the redacted and the original. That's when you can use contact attributes to set your configuration dynamically. Now, a couple of notes here before we move on about the sensitive data redaction feature. An important note of this feature is that due to the predictive nature of machine learning, there may be instances where contact lens may not redact all instances of sensitive data. And the feature also does not meet the requirements for de-identification under laws like HIPAA. So medical privacy laws, those requirements are not met by this feature. So when considering the use of this feature, it's really important for you to consider your legal and compliance obligations, and also think about how you want to handle instances where contact lens may not be able to remove all pieces of sensitive data. The final call that I'm going to make about this feature is that it is an on-off feature. So that means that you don't really get control over what is going to be redacted versus what is not going to be redacted from your transcripts. So if you require more granular control over what is being redacted, or if you want some but not all points of data redacted, this feature may not provide you with that level of control over what is being identified as sensitive. So just keep that in mind. I have seen that use case sometimes where, for compliance reasons, they may want one piece of information in the recording, but not another. And when you are getting into those requirements, we generally have to start talking about a more customized option for you. So one of the great features that becomes available once you start using contact lens in your Amazon Connect instance is the ability to easily create rules based on your call transcription and analysis. So if you'll allow me one bad pun, I like to say that Amazon Connect rules really help demonstrate why contact lens rules. So what I mean by rules is that in the Amazon Connect UI, if you have sufficient permissions, you should see an icon to the left that looks like a hammer or a gavel, depending on your familiarity with gavels. If you hover over that icon, it will show you the option to go to the rules section of the UI. And again, this is something that we'll be walking through with Rishi in just a few minutes. Remember that access to Amazon Connect resources like rules is still determined by the security profile that is assigned to your specific Amazon Connect user. So if you are thinking about using rules, you'll just want to ensure that the folks who will be creating or maintaining those rules have the necessary permissions in their security profiles to do that work. So if you're using one of the out-of-the-box security profiles that Amazon Connect provides to you, there's 4 that come out of the box. If you're using one of those, have a look at the permissions for the folks that you are assigning those roles to, and make sure that they have the necessary permissions to create, view, or edit rules. Same thing goes if you have custom security profiles or planning to use custom security profiles. You'll want to just think about providing the right folks with access to manage those resources. Now, what rules do is they enable you to create alerts, generate tasks, and categorize your contacts based on contact lens analysis. You can set up the rules to be applied either in real time or post call. So some of the major things that you're going to deal with here is that you can create real-time alerts. Let's say you want to notify a supervisor about a high-risk customer or a concern about fraud. You may also consider generating tasks, and also this allows you to put your contacts into buckets, indicating what type of issue you're dealing with. Creating rules is a 2-step process. The first step, these are both things that we'll be walking through with Rishi, but the first step is to define your conditions, and the second step is to define your actions. So once you go into the rules section, you will see the option to create a rule. You'll be asked to provide a name for the rule, and also select if you want the rule to be applied during post-call analysis or real-time analysis. An important thing to note here is that once created, the rules are applied during the contact lens analysis. If you are just now enabling contact lens, or if you have implemented contact lens but have not set up any rules already, you cannot apply these rules to your old stored conversations. The rules will be applied to your new incoming conversations with customers. So the time when you set up your rule is when it starts essentially running on the analysis that is being conducted by contact lens. So you will then be taken to a UI where you'll be allowed to add any of the following conditions listed on the slide. You can create conditions, rules that are based on the words that are being uttered by the customer or the agent. When you can also use this customer sentiment. So, if they're angry, or if they're happy, or if they're neutral. You can also choose to set up rules that are based on things like non-talk time. Let's say there is a prolonged period of no talking in your call. That might be something that you want to bring to the attention of your supervisors or quality assurance folks, get them involved to see what might be happening there. As I mentioned, you can also do basic words or phrases. So, in our example that we're going to show you today, it's a customer who is calling to cancel their account. And in this case, we want to get a supervisor involved right away to provide coaching to our agent and support them in dealing with this call. Now, when you're working with words and phrases, you have the option to trigger actions based on exact match, pattern match, or semantic match. I'm not going to get into the differences today, but the link in the slide will provide you with greater detail about these concepts. Just a word that I want to leave you with here is that currently semantic match is only supported if you're using post-call analysis. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about what sorts of rules you want to set up, and how you want them to be detected based on what's happening in the call. As I already mentioned, you have the option to also create conditions that are based on characteristics of the contact itself. This could be, the subset of agents, the queue, or specific contact attributes, custom attributes that you have set during the customer's journey. So it's not limited to creating rules simply based on the contact lens analysis. You can also set up rules that are scoped to specific agents or queues, or you could use contact attributes to make sure that your rules are only getting triggered in certain instances. And then the next step, once you have we are done defining your conditions, is to define the action or actions to be taken when that rule is met. So the first required action is to assign a contact category, which is required for any rule. If the group, this will group the contacts that match that rule together so that if necessary, your supervisors can then easily pull all calls related to a specific contact category when they're looking for calls in the Amazon Connect UI. Then you can optionally add additional actions, and you can either choose to generate an Eventbridge event or create an Amazon Connect task. So those are your two options that you'll be presented with when you're trying to configure your rules. Amazon Eventbridge, if it's not a service that you're familiar with, it's another AWS service, and it's essentially a serverless event bus service. So this might be something, if you're already using AWS in your business, this might already be a service that you've heard about or seen used in other implementations. Typically, you use it to connect applications with data from a variety of other sources. By setting this as an action, you would essentially be generating an event that can be used to trigger alerting or reporting in systems outside of Amazon Connect. So as an example today, we'll be showing you an email notification based on the results of real-time analysis. Some other possible use cases that AWS provides in the documentation include, getting real-time alerts in a quick site dashboard, creating aggregated reporting outside of Amazon Connect, or joining data with your CRM. So, if you want to send data to your CRM based on certain actions being triggered, let's say because you want someone to follow up on that from the CRM, this is where you would be essentially doing that. An important thing to note is that your event will result in a JavaScript object notation or JSON payload, which you can then use to further process your event. In this payload, the contact category name will appear as rule name, and the Eventbridge action name that you define in the console that will appear as the action name. So, you can write your Lambda, and based on those contact categories, you can have different logic for what you want to happen with the call. Eventbridge events work really well if you need to generate an event that can be consumed outside of Amazon Connect. But there may also be instances where you want to generate tasks within Amazon Connect, perhaps because your supervisors or QA team are already in Connect, and based on the rules you are creating, you want them to follow up on something that's happening in your contact center. So this is the second type of action that you can create when setting up a rule. Let's quickly back up and just talk about tasks, because I know I just mentioned a new concept here. Tasks are another type of contact that you can have in Amazon Connect. And they are a unit of work that an agent or supervisor or QA person, whoever you're assigning it to, must complete. And it is routed, prioritized, and assigned just like your voice and chat contacts. So your agents or supervisors would handle tasks in the same contact control panel that agents use to answer voice and chat tasks, voice and chat contacts, sorry, don't want to confuse you there. And in this context, tasks provide you with the ability to create a unit of work within Amazon Connect that is associated with a voice contact. So when you create a task from a rule, what happens is it immediately becomes linked to the voice interaction that generated that task. So when you are looking in the Amazon Connect UI, you can see the contact record for the voice call. And then as a linked item, you can also see the follow-up task that was created and handled by someone else in response to that rule being triggered because of that voice contact. So some examples that we can think of for when we may create tasks versus, tasks are essentially a way for you to create a unit of work that's not a transfer. So, when we start thinking about these use cases, you would be thinking about things like coaching. It may also be to, review potentially fraudulent contacts or follow up on quality issues, or, like in our example today, we're going to be dealing with people canceling their account. You may want to create a follow-up task so that a supervisor then follows up with your customer and maybe tries to upsell them or tries to talk them out of canceling the service. The possibilities are really open to you depending on what your business requirements are. The other great thing about creating these sorts of tasks in Amazon Connect for your supervisors or QA folks or agents is that in your task name and description, you can dynamically include values about the related contact that triggered the rule. So for instance, you'll see later today that when we trigger a task based on a voice call that comes in, that task is going to have information about that voice contact, including a link to a real-time transcript of that call as it progresses. So you can really provide the person who is receiving a task with a lot of great context about the task that they are trying to follow up on. So just to reiterate, our two options, you're using Eventbridge if we are going outside of Amazon Connect, but if this follow-up is something that can be handled in Amazon Connect, let's say it's a coaching follow-up or a supervisor follow-up within Amazon Connect to a customer, you can create Amazon Connect tasks. So just keep those two categories in your head as we move forward. So when we think about improving the efficiency of your contact center and deflecting repeat callers and escalations, we often think about solutions at the queue level. However, empowering your agents to better handle customer inquiries can be an important part of that picture. And that's where Amazon Connect Wisdom, which is a newer feature, really comes in. Wisdom is a great feature for the purpose of allowing you to connect your knowledge repositories, whether it is an internal FAQ or a third-party, application like ServiceNow, Salesforce, or Zendesk. At a base level, this feature really allows you to create FAQs that agents can easily traverse to find the information they need to handle calls. But with real-time analytics enabled, the great thing about Amazon Connect Wisdom is that the tool can be even more useful to your agents by proactively recommending knowledge-based resources to your agents in real time. Obviously, for reasons that may be plainly obvious to you now, this feature will only work in this predictive way if you have real-time analytics enabled, because having the real-time analytics enabled will allow Contact Lens to listen to the conversation and then make suggestions to your agent based on some of the things that it's hearing in that conversation. So this is another great use case if you're trying to figure out if you just need post-call analytics or if you may have a use case that could benefit from real-time analysis. It's not just alerting and notification that you can think about. It's also whether you can use real-time analytics to really enrich the agent experience. So we'll not be walking you through the different steps of setting up Wisdom as part of our presentation and demo today, but I did want to show you a real life use case of Wisdom. Perficient has a solution called PACE, which is the Perficient Amazon Connect experience. It is a solution that is powered by Amazon Connect, and it is, it provides several bundled features that are not included out of the box, and also provides managed services for your implementation as well. I'm iterating over this not as a sales pitch for PACE. I know Lara already mentioned it earlier today, but I did want to show you that they have started enabling this feature for their customers. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just click on this blog post here and just give this a second to load, and I'm just going to quickly show you a use case for this feature in a real life context, just to give you a better understanding of how this works. So this is a recent blog post from our team about new features for Pace. And one of the things that they have now enabled their Pace customers to do as of November 15th is to be able to use the Wisdom integration. And I specifically want to draw your attention to this screenshot here. Let me know if anyone is not able to see that clearly. I can zoom in a bit further. I'm just going to quickly explain what's going on in this screenshot. What we see here on the left is the contact control panel for Amazon Connect. You'll be seeing this in action as part of our demo. This is the contact control panel that your agents or supervisors use to handle phone calls or chats or tasks. You'll see here that this agent in particular is available, and we can see from this little time here that they're on an active call. And if you look over to the right of this panel, you'll see that there is this search wisdom bar. And let's just wait for this to go back to the start of this. You'll see that there's a little green bubble that's popping up here as the call is proceeding with 3 suggestions. So let's wait for that to show up here again. Do we see the 3 suggestions there? And then the agent clicks on that, and you'll see that they're presented with 3 knowledge base articles that Wisdom has, based on the contact lens information, detected as potentially being related to what this particular customer is talking about. So really shows you how powerful this tool could be. It essentially provides your agents with a on-call resource that's able to provide them with helpful guidance on how best to handle this contact based on the NLP that's available through Contact Lens. So with that cleared back off, I wanted to show you that. And now we can move over to having a little Q&A on what Contact Lens is. But before we start our Q&A, we're going to show you a quick demo of all of these Contact Lens features in action. So if you have questions, do start putting those into the chat. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass it on to our demo resource, Rishi, who's going to be walking you through a great little demo of all of these features in action.
I hope you enjoyed the first part of our Contact Lens presentation. My name is Rishi, and I'll be leading the demo portion of our advanced workshop today. I'm going to start by showing you the Amazon Connect user interface, which you can see now on my screen. Currently, I'm logged in as an administrator, so I'm able to see everything in our current instance. So what we're looking at here actually is a basic contact record of a call that I handled earlier as part of a test run. A contact represents a singular interaction between an agent and a customer. So we can see here on the left-hand side of my screen, some basic metadata relative to this contact trace record. Instead, I'd like you to focus your attention on the right side of the screen where we have 3 graphs. We see here we have one graph which shows a distribution of the customer sentiment trend over the duration of our call, which was approximately 2 minutes and 22 seconds. We also have a color-coded bar graph here, which shows the same thing, except of course color-coded, green being positive, gray being neutral, and red being negative. And we have our non-talk time bar graph here, which is color-coded as well, where we have our agent talk time of 38%, we have our customer talk time of about 38%, and we have our non-talk time in the call for 22%. So quickly going to this distribution here, a bit of a context, -5 actually correlates with the most negative sentiment that could occur in a contact. +5 also correlates with positive, the most positive interaction that could occur, and 0 is a neutral interaction. So as you can see in this particular interaction that we're looking at, the max here on our graph is 0, and it trends from about less than 0, mostly going all the way down to 1, -5, and then all the way up to 0 here. So this was overall a pretty negative interaction. And actually you can see that here as well in the color-coded segment, where about half was negative, about half was neutral, and about 11% was positive, as depicted in this graph. And of course, also we have our non-talk time here, which is denoted in yellow, of about 22%. So that essentially is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, parts of the conversation where there was no discussion going on behalf of either the agent or the customer. So I want to quickly show you what this contact trace record would look like without contact lens enabled as a sort of comparison. So this actually is the contact trace record here without contact lens enabled, as you can see on my screen. We have the same basic metadata here on the left side. However, we do not have those three beautiful graphs that we saw earlier. And this is directly because we did not enable contact lens for this particular flow, for this particular contact trace record rather. You can see we also have the recording and we have some metadata at the bottom, but we really don't see a lot of the great graphs that we saw earlier. And there are definitely a few other features that I'd like to show you here. So now going back to our contact trace record enabled with contact lens, we see here this category section with this word cancellation, and we see the number 3 next to it. So this, as Umair discussed earlier, is part of a rule that we've actually pre-configured here, and I will be actually getting into this further on in the demo. For now, just know that this rule was triggered and pretty much categorized this contact under the cancellation bucket, which of course is associated with the rule, and I'll be getting into that further. Moving along down here, we see this recording and transcript, which we saw in the non-contact enabled version. However, we see these color-coded segments here at the bottom. And this is a great feature, actually, that you can pretty much scrub to particular points in this graph, or in this transcript, rather. So I just clicked on the red segment, which brings us to a negative sentiment, as also denoted by this red smiley face in the transcript. We can also go to a positive interaction here, or positive segment rather, simply by scrubbing to it as well. And we could see a positive smiley face associated with it. And also we can go to the gray areas, which denotes non-talk time. And that also scrubs appropriately. So that kind of is one part, and this is denoted by the auto scroll button, which you can enable or disable. There's also the show transcript summary button here, which if I enable actually shows us in a singular manner each step of our transcript, or rather each step of the contact interaction. So I can quickly go ahead and click the bottom arrow here, and it brings us step by step through this conversation. This, of course, would be useful for a call center manager or a quality analyst to kind of step through this conversation in a singular manner rather than seeing the entire transcript and, of course, having to read every transcript for every interaction. So there we have it. We can simply go through here. Now, this brings us to a very important part of this, which is denoted by this PII. So if you remember earlier, Umair was mentioning something about sensitive data redaction. And this is exactly how it is denoted in the transcript summary. Since we checked this box in our contact flow, which I'll show you how we do, this actually, you can see here, the customer states, my name is PII and my zip code is PII. So of course, in the actual interaction in real time when it took place, they uttered their name and they uttered their zip code. However, as you can see, we have a PII denotation, which of course secures partly the information that was uttered by the customer, which of course is personal information. So that is kind of the PII in summary. So of course, we have the same basic metadata here. Now you might be wondering, how exactly can we enable contact lens? In order to see a contact lens version of each contact trace record, there are two key steps you must take. I'll go ahead and show you the first of 2 steps now, starting at the instance level. So here, we're actually in our AWS management console. I'm going to go ahead and type in Amazon Connect to search for this service. You see here, we have a list of our instances. Let's go ahead and find the one we've configured. This, of course, would be in the name that you already configured your instance in. Now, we see this on the left side, we have a bunch of different options. Let's go ahead and focus on the analytics tools section. And as you can see, we have the simple checkbox that Umair was discussing earlier to enable contact lens. So we, of course, have this check, so contact lens will be enabled at the instance level. Of course, we're not going to go ahead and save, but when you do enable this, make sure you hit save so it is saved appropriately for your instance. So I've just showed you the first step in enabling contact lens at the instance level. I'll now go ahead and show you the second step, which can be done granularly at the contact flow level. This can be found here on the left sidebar where we go into this routing option, this directional arrow for reference, and we can go down here into contact flows. So just a bit of a background, a flow is made up of actually of drag and droppable blocks or nodes, which together precisely define your customer's interaction. By definition, a contact flow is how a customer experiences your contact center from start to finish. Here you can see a variety of blocks. We're actually going to focus on the set recording and analytics behavior block, as that pertains directly to our contact lens. As you can see on the right side here of what I've highlighted, this is an inbound contact flow, just for context. So let's go, and where you can actually find this set recording and analytics behavior block is in this left side tab here. We have a variety of the blocks, and we will go into this one, which you can see here, set recording and analytics behavior. So let's go ahead and click that and see what we have here. So as you can see, our first option is to enable or disable this on behalf of the agent and customer. We see two radio buttons, and these are essential in the step 2 process of enabling contact flow granularly at the enabling contact lens at the contact flow level. You see we have this on, we have this on, and we also have the agent and customer radio button selected. I want to stress that you must have this button on agent and customer hit and not agent only or customer only in order for contact lens to work. So that's just a pretty significant point that you must pick this one as well. So going down here, we have our contact lens speech analytics block, or not block rather, but option. We're going to go ahead and have this checkbox as well to simply enable contact lens for speech analytics. So if you remember previously, Umair was discussing some of the infrastructure surrounding or underlying this Amazon Connect and contact lens. This exactly is how you enable that for it and put it to use. So going down here, we have either the option to choose post-call analytics or real-time and post-call analytics. We're going to go ahead and have real-time analytics enabled, but of course, post-call analytics comes with the pro of having the best transcription accuracy. In your business use case, if you value real-time analytics, you would probably want to choose this option here. But if it's not so important, then you might want to opt for better transcription accuracy. The choice of customization is yours. So let's go down here, and we also have this language option here, which we can set manually or use a contact attribute. So contact attributes, as Umair discussed earlier, are key value pairs of data relevant to a particular interaction. You can dynamically set these attributes using a set contact attributes block. For the purposes of this demo, we're not going to dive too in-depth into the various blocks and nodes Amazon Connect has to offer. Instead, please refer to the AWS admin guide that has been linked in the chat for specifics on various blocks. But here, we actually have used this attribute so instead of setting this language manually, we have set this attribute to dynamically detect the language and refactor this contact flow for a variety of languages, as opposed to setting up a new contact flow for every language. So this, of course, helps with refactorability and making the development process a bit more efficient for your developers in your business. So now we also have this redact sensitive data option, which we actually saw put to use earlier with that PII denotation in brackets. As Umair discussed and showed you earlier, and as you're seeing now, this is a very simple check of a button that we have enabled, which is exactly why you saw the behavior of PII denoted. Here you have some further customizations. We have 3 options. We can either generate both redacted and original transcripts, or we can generate just the redacted transcript only and both redacted and original audio. We also can use contact attributes as we did up here, but we have this currently configured to generate as a top option to generate both redacted and original transcripts and audio. So those are all the options here in our set recordings and analytics behavior block. Of course, make sure to hit save after configuring this, and voila, we have now this contact flow with contact lens enabled, which is step 2 of the 2-step process of enabling contact lens. So I've just showed you the 2 essential steps in enabling contact lens. Now we must consider who should have access to these transcripts and sentiment analysis. How you can control this in Amazon Connect is through security profiles. In Amazon Connect, there are pre-built, pre-configured security profiles which are readily out-of-the-box functional. There are 4 main profiles here that you can see on my screen. And just a bit of a side note, how I got here actually is in this left sidebar, going to the 2 people icon. And we also see in here the security profiles tab, which is exactly where I am. So as I said earlier, we actually have 4 pre-configured out-of-the-box functionality. We have a brief description of each. Rather, I would instead like you to focus your attention on the permission side of this table. And you see we have varying permissions associated with varying roles in our business. So we see here as the admin, which I'm currently logged in as, has the most permissions associated with it, as you might expect. We also have below that an agent with just few permissions. We have a call center manager with more permissions, and we have a quality analyst with a fewer permissions. So this exactly is how you can configure, or how you can put to use Amazon's pre-built configured pro security profiles. Just for demonstration's sake, we're going to go ahead and add a new security profile, so I can show you how to do this if you would like to customize this for your particular use case. Let's go ahead and show the metrics and quality category of permissions. And we see here on the left side the different types of permissions that can be associated at a granular level. This, of course, is a blank slate. We can go ahead and choose any permission that we would like associated with this particular profile that we're creating with a simple check of a box. And that is pretty much the gist of our security profiles. So moving on here, I'll now show you another feature that results from the enablement of Contact Lens, and this is the ability to filter search multiple contact trace records. I'll show you some of the neat filters, specifically the ones in gray, as you can see here on my screen. We see 4 here, of course, which are contact lens filters, denoted by the CL. This is important because it enables you to do one of 2 things. A, search for specific contacts based on your choice of filter, and B, choose multiple filters to get a very refined search based on your query of interest. I'll be showing you both here, starting with the contact lens specific filters. So let's go ahead and type in, choose one of these filters. Let's go and pick sentiment score. So we choose that. And here we have the sentiment of either the agent or the customer. Let's go ahead and select customer here for this use case. We have the sentiment score for the entire contact, which pretty much tells Amazon Connect, or the filter rather, to analyze for the entire contact, not just particular intervals of time. And we have here we have the main logic here that we will be configuring. So here, let's say in our business use case, we have a lot of angry customers, and we want to further analyze this as maybe a call center analyst would, or a quality analyst would, or a contact center manager. Let's go ahead and configure this to be less than or equal to, where the entire contact sentiment is less than or equal to 0, which of course 0 is the positive, and -5 is the most negative. So as soon as we hit apply here, we'll see some processing done, and voila, we have now a refined search based on the filter that we have added, and of course made possible by Contact Lens. So as you can see here, each contact, this of course is each contact trace record, which is exactly how we started this demo. But now we have actually a refined list here that maybe a quality analyst would have an easier time going through and searching for maybe, for example, training purposes for new agents, or just to see how exactly our contact center is doing. So
Rishi, I'm just going to chime in here as well, because there was a good question in the chat that I just want to pick up on. Rishi is talking about building out your filters here and this 4 specific contact lens filters, but picking up on a question that someone had asked about whether you can, analyze specific departments or specific types of contacts. You could build out your filters by adding additional filters. So for instance, if you're only interested in bulk reviewing contacts that came into a specific queue, you can pair your contact lens filters with, let's say, a filter for the queue name. And a document that I linked to in the chat is that if that doesn't give you the functionality that you require, you can also search based on custom contact attributes. So in your contact flow, if you're setting, let's say, a department name in your contact flow, and then once the conversation is over, you want to just be able to search for any negative sentiment calls for that specific department, you also have the ability in this console to add filtering based on those custom contact attributes. So that won't be part of the demo as Rishi continues, but I just wanted to flag that that is something you can enable if that is something you want to get granular with.
Thank you, Umer. So picking up where I actually just left off here. So now we actually have, of course, here the negative sentiments. Now, what if we in our business want to add another filter to do another refined search? So this is actually done very easily as we can add another filter here. So let's go ahead and type in another, or configure rather, another contact filter. Let's go ahead and type in the words or phrase here. And let's go and say used by the customer, because this, of course, is customer focused. And let's type in a word or phrase that we would like to detect. So in this case, let's go ahead and type in cancel. But of course, in your business, you could type in any word or phrase that you would like to, or that you would like to focus on and pick up on. So let's go ahead and say cancel here. And let's go ahead and apply this. And boom. Now, as you can see, we have two filters active, and we have an even more refined search of contact trace records. And this exactly is the power of contact lens, because without contact lens enabled, you would not be able to add these filters and search based on these contact lens specific features. Awesome. So that pretty much shows exactly what I would like to show with the filters. Now, I will show you one last feature here that is a bit complex, and that is done using rules. If you remember previously, I showed you a category that was automatically created and recognized in the sample contact record. That, of course, was the cancellation category. And the reason that this happened is because a pre-configured rule was triggered. Rules, for a bit of a context, are built-in logical statements that, when triggered, carry out some further action. Our job as developers and system designers is to configure this rule based on certain conditions, then define actions we want as a result. As Umair discussed previously, the two main actions that can be associated with the rule are internal Amazon Connect instance tasks and external Eventbridge buses, or Eventbridge events rather. Let us start by creating and defining a simple rule, and I would like to walk you through this. So where I actually am here in this section is in the middle right here with this icon, and we see the only option is rules. So let's go ahead and create a rule. You see here, we already have one rule configured. This exactly is where once you hit save and publish, you will have a list of all the rules. And this actually is one out of the, or not out of the box, actually a custom one that we have done earlier. So let's go ahead and create a rule. We have the option of using either contact lens or third-party integration. I'm not going to get too much into the third-party integration option, but just to quickly show you here, we have obviously the when clause, and this actually is the enables you to connect with its external CRM system, whether that be Salesforce or Zendesk. So that pretty much is kind of the gist of it. I'm not going to get too far into this for the purpose of this demo and in the interest of time, but rather let's go into contact lens, as this is the focus of our bootcamp. So here we have a when clause, and actually above here, I would like to quickly note this three-step process here, where step one is to define our conditions. Step two is to define our actions, which actually are optional. And step three, which is to review and save this exactly what we configured. So I will go ahead and start by defining our when clause. We have the option here of a contact lens post-call analysis is available, or the option of a real-time analysis is available. Let's go ahead and select real-time for our use case. And I want to stress this is very important here, because you must keep this consistent with your contact flows. So if you remember previously, when I was showing you at a bit granular level, we actually selected real-time analysis. And that is the exact reason why we are selecting real-time analysis here. If I was to select post-call analysis, we actually would not be able to use contact lens, and there would be a bit of an inconsistency. So just a bit of a side note, just please make sure that you have these consistent when you are going in and configuring your own contact flows and contact lens. So moving on here, we have our if statement. And of course, we have all of these conditions are met. We have none right now, so let's go ahead and add a condition, which can be done with this add condition box, or buttons rather. We see we have about 6 different options. We're going to focus on the words or phrases where there's an exact match. So we click that, and you see here we have a bit of a template that will pop up here. Now we see, let's go ahead and go into this logic. We have this logic where any of the following words or phrases were mentioned, which is already grayed out and configured, during the entire, which is already configured, length of the contact, where the speaker is, here we have the option of choosing agent, customer, or either. For our business use case, let's go ahead and select customer for the purpose of this demo. And now underneath here, you can see where my cursor is. We have keywords or phrases that we can enter that Amazon's underlying infrastructure that powers contact lens can search for and appropriately bucket/categorize. So let's go ahead and type in, since we're looking for cancellations of an account in your business, if you're a fintech business, it might be a bank account. In your healthcare, it might be a health account. So it can be very customized to your particular domain. So let's go ahead and type in cancel. So now you see, as soon as we hit enter, we have this populated in our keywords and phrases table here. Let's go ahead and type in a few more. I would like to cancel my account. Let's go ahead and type in cancel my account as well. So you see here, just in the interest of time, I'll stop here with 3, but you can pretty much infinitely add as many as you want. And the whole point of doing this is to essentially teach Amazon's underlying NLP what to look for, what are the phrases to look for, and if they are found, we will associate this with a particular category. That is essentially the whole power of using rules and, of course, using contact lens. So we have now pretty much finished rule 1, or step 1 rather. We can add more conditions, but I'm just going to go ahead and click next here. And now that brings us to our actions tab. So as you can see here, this exactly is where you would name the cancellation, or you would name the bucket that you would like this to be. Of course, we could go ahead and define this right now, but I'm going to actually stop and show you one that we've actually pre-configured here. So we're going to go back here. We have our cancellation rule. Just to quickly show you, we have the same rule here, words exact match, and we have the various keywords or phrases that we've configured. Now we're going to go ahead and click next. And boom, we are now in the same step 2 of our define actions overview here. So we have named this, of course, cancellation, hence why we saw cancellation in the first part of our demo under the categories tab. Now we also have this option, or we have 2 options here. We have the option to generate an Eventbridge event, or we have the option to create a task. So the way I like to think about this is Eventbridge is external to Amazon Connect, and create an Amazon Connect task obviously is internal to Amazon Connect. So here we have just named for our Eventbridge event alert_supervisor. You can name this however you see fit. As you can see here, very easily changeable. And now underneath here, we have our internal task that could be created. Here we have the name here. We just have named it action required. You can change this as well. We have our description, which of course is mutable. And we also have our task reference name, which of course can be changed, as well as our URL. So basically to show that this can be customized particularly to your use case and what you would like your agents or supervisors to be prompted with in your task. So here, the last part of this is to essentially define this action here. Oh, we already defined the actions, but now we want to associate this action with a particular flow. So as you can see here, we would like to select the flow that should route this task. Let's go ahead and click this drop down. You see we have multiple flows, and we have associated with this rule with our credit card cancellation supervisor alert flow. We go ahead and click that. And we will go ahead and click next here. And now you see here in our overlay, we are in the 3rd step, which actually is the easiest of the 3. This is where we're going to go ahead and review the rule we just created, and pretty much get a gist of what to make sure that this is exactly what we would like our rule to do. So we have our when clause. Of course, we configured this to be real time. We have our if statement, where we have the exact match of the following words: cancel, cancellation, and a few more here. And then we have our then clause, which of course is optional, where we can take 1 of 2 actions. And we've actually configured 1 rule with 2 actions, which of course is one thing you could do, or you can associate 1 rule with multiple actions. It really pertains to how you would like this customized to your fit. So of course we have our Eventbridge event notification here, and we have our task created here. Let's go ahead and scroll down, and boom, we have this blue button here to save and publish what we did. If everything looks good in this step, we will go ahead and do that. And boom, you see here, our rule has been saved successfully, denoted by this green check mark and box. And that is exactly where this rule would pop up in this table. So I've shown you how to configure a rule. Now let's see this rule in action. Umair will call into our contact center and mention he wants to cancel his account. I'm going to act as the agent. He will act as the caller. I'll accept the call in the agent control panel, briefly utter a responsive acknowledgement, and close the contact. After the call is hung up, you will see me as the supervisor receiving a task. For the purposes of this demo, I'll be playing both role of the agent and the supervisor. In a regular contact center, a supervisor would be receiving the alert in real time while the agent is still on call. We will see both the task created and an email notification pop up in my supervisor inbox. So I will go ahead and access the CCP by clicking this call icon here in the top right. And of course, make sure I'm available to receive calls. Umair, would you like to go ahead and call?
Calling now.
Awesome. We see here the call has been picked up. We're gonna go ahead and accept the call. Hello, how can I assist you today? Absolutely, I can surely do that for you. Thank you for calling in and have a great day. So I've just ended this call here. I'm gonna go ahead and close this contact.
Let's try that again. I think my phone was cutting out a little bit. I could see I'm gonna make another call in.
Okay, sure thing. Oh,
Never mind.
so
Yeah, there's your task. So
yep.
just took a
So as
second.
yes, and that is totally fine here. But as you can see, our task did pop up with the exact description that we've configured, and of course, a task reference. So as I mentioned, in a real scenario, a supervisor would be receiving this task, not me, and would be able to, in real time, click this link and view the transcript on the call. This is the link that I'm talking about here. And we can see here a real-time contact summary with the category that was triggered, customer sentiment, which is overly negative. And we have a brief transcript, which essentially will provide context to the supervisor to be able to appropriately follow up and efficiently handle this call. And that, of course, will wrap up our contact lens portion of the advanced workshop. I'll now kick it back to Umair for a Q&A.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for that presentation, Rishi. I'm just going to share my PowerPoint and we're getting some great questions. So I'm going to touch on some of those as well. So just give me one moment here while I share my screen. Okay, so some great questions in the chat. I'm going to go through a couple of them really quickly. Someone asked if contact lens will, let me just look back at this. Give me 1 second. Does contact lens capture customer input from Lex? That is a good question. But I would really differentiate between Lex and contact lens in your mind. They are two very different things. When you're using Lex, you are generally using it in your customer contact flows before the call goes to an agent. And in some cases, the entire conversation may be handled by your Lex bot. So you may not even need to transfer to an agent. Contact lens is a feature that runs on your call recordings as between your agent and your customer. So there's really no kind of connection between the two, other than that they're just two different ways to use artificial intelligence in your contact center. Your Lex information is going to be in your contact flow. It might return some information that you can make available to your agent, but generally the analysis that's conducted by contact lens is on the recording as between your agent and your customer. So it's only related to your live calls. Another great question that we saw in the chat just a few minutes ago from Nick that I'm just going to pull up is whether sentiment scores for the entire call are a metadata item that's actually written to your contact trace record. And he had indicated that he could not find that score or numerical value in any of the contact details. This is an excellent question. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier about how contact lens is really well integrated with your contact contact records in the UI, but it's important to know that it's not the same data set. Basically what happens is when a transcript and sentiment analysis is generated, it gets saved into what's called an AWS service called S3, or simple storage service, which is a way for you to easily store data in buckets. And so what happens is your transcript and sentiment analysis is in a JavaScript object notation format, and it gets saved over into S3. And usually what happens is the file name will have the contact ID for that specific contact. So as a supervisor, not to make this overly complicated, but as a supervisor, when you are looking at that contact record, as Rishi was showing you, it is smart enough to know that if there is data that is in that other AWS service called S3 that provides us with transcript and sentiment analysis, Connect is smart enough to render it for you in one place, which is what I was talking about how well integrated it is. You really don't have to do a lot of work about getting those two pieces of data to live together. Now, I do want to also just mention, in case it's of interest, that additional data payload that gets generated by Contact Lens and gets saved to your S3 bucket, you can do whatever you want with it. We have seen, instances where someone has sent that information to their CRM in order to be able to, have that information reflected there, or have transcripts in their CRM. We've also seen people who send that information to their data warehouse. We have seen people build BI tools with that data. So it's really up to you what you do with that data, but it is a separate piece of data from your actual contact records. Great question. Other questions about Contact Lens or any of the features that we discussed?
TA was asking a question about if you know how it compares to tools like Cogito, C-O-G-I-T-O.
Cognito. I think you're talking about Cognito. How is it compared to tools like Cognito? That's a good question. I don't know if it's really a direct comparison. Cognito is like an entirely different tool. So we have customers who use Cognito. It really depends on your business requirements and what you're trying to do and what tools you want to use internally. I don't know if there is a direct comparison, but Mattia is on this call. Compared to tools like Cogito. Okay, this is a tool I'm less familiar with. So just looking here, Mattia is sending me some information. So let me keep me connection. Okay, I'm not familiar with this particular tool, TA. So I would be happy to look into this further, maybe offline, and maybe have a discussion with you about that. But just looking at this, I don't think I'm that familiar with Cogito. Matt, are you?
No,
would you have any context on this?
I am not. We haven't encountered this. Usually whenever we work with Amazon Connect implementations, we stick to the AWS ecosystem of services. So we have not used this in our implementations. Mm-hmm. We could, like Umair suggested, give it a review and provide our feedback if that is of any value to you, but no, we don't have any hands-on experience with the tool.
Correct. Our second big presentation is going to be about Lex chatbots. And when we're speaking specifically about Lex bots, we're going to dig in a bit deeper into the use of code hooks with your Amazon Lex bots. So let's get started. So before we do a more advanced dive on code hooks for your Amazon Lex bots, let's briefly just quickly talk about Amazon Lex chatbots for your contact center, and let's go over some basic concepts. Now, I just want to quickly say here that you're going to hear me say Lex bots or Lex chatbots interchangeably. When I say chatbots, I want to make it clear that you can use Lex for both voice-based and chat-based interactions. So that is not my way of saying that this is limiting you to just using chat as a channel when you're working with Lex. It's just common parlance to refer to these as chatbots, but just know that when I say chatbots, I mean bots that could be used for either channel. Some basic Lex concepts that we should cover before we start digging in. Amazon Lex is a service for building conversational interfaces into any application using both voice and text. It's two things: automatic speech recognition, or ASR, and natural language understanding. Automatic speech recognition, much like we were seeing with contact lens, it just means the words you're speaking. Whatever language you're speaking, I want to know what those words are. And then natural language understanding, as we similarly saw with contact lens, is trying to figure out exactly what you're saying. What is your intent? 5 people can say the same thing with the same intent, but say it very differently. So, we're really trying to figure out what is the core intention of what was said. Lex provides the advanced deep learning functionalities of automatic speech recognition for converting speech to text, if you're dealing with a voice call, let's say, and also natural language understanding to recognize the intent of the text to enable you to build applications with highly engaging user experiences with lifelike conversational interactions. With Amazon Lex, the same deep learning technologies that power Amazon Alexa are now available to any developer. So if you have an Alexa device in your home, which I know a lot or most people do, you are then familiar with what Lex is trying to accomplish. Lex enables you to quickly and easily build sophisticated natural language chatbots. It's a fully managed service, so that means that it scales automatically. You don't need to worry about managing any infrastructure. And like many other services with Amazon Lex, you only pay for what you use in this platform. There are no upfront commitments, no minimum fees, and it's consistent with the pay-per-use model that you may have seen if you have worked with services like Amazon Connect. Something also to note, I did make a note that you can use both voice and chat interactions with Lex. Something that Amazon has recently announced is that they also now support keypad inputs. So the caller can either speak a response or they could use the more traditional DTMF input. Let's say if they're entering sensitive information, or they're in a public place, or for whatever other reason they would just prefer to communicate using DTMF. You have the option of building your conversation to be more conversational, or you could also stick with the DTMF input, and Lex would be able to support both. Amazon Lex can integrate with Amazon Connect very easily to deliver IVR experiences in contact flows. And this goes back to one of the questions that was asked right before we went on the break about whether contact lens and Lex ever interact. And I had said, we really should keep these separated in our understanding, because although they're both kind of like examples of how you can use AI to really supercharge your contact center, they're coming into play at different stages of the interaction. Contact lens, as we discussed earlier, was when your customer is actually connected to your agent and we're running an analysis on that recording, and then we're doing something with that analysis. Lex, you're using in your IVRs. So often this is before you would be going to an agent. You may still go to an agent after your LexBot interaction has completed, but generally this will be happening in the IVR rather than during the call. So why would you want to use bots like this in your contact center? Well, how I would think about it is really thinking about your high volume and low value add inquiries. Often when we work with customers, we get these use cases that agents have to often deal with, and there are often these very simple actions or questions that your agents are having to perform over and over again with very little value being added there. Examples could include maybe customers calling in to check on the status of delivery, or calling in to verify a pickup location, or just one of those rote tasks that day-to-day pop up that are very easy to handle, but add additional work for your agents when they may not necessarily need to be involved. This stuff is simple to figure out because when you have a little bit of information, and you could really save your agents time for more complex customer inquiries, because you could basically offload this to the bot to handle these very simple and repetitive tasks. Another great way that bots can potentially improve your customer's IVR experience is through the use of natural language. So I know that we all have different levels of familiarity with Amazon Connect, but I would reasonably guess that most of us during our lifetimes have had to call one of those really tedious IVRs that is menu after menu after menu. And at some point, you're inclined to just give up because it has made it so hard to be connected to an agent. I often find myself shouting agent into the phone in order to cut through this. So, Lex is something that can really help you in that regard, because by understanding what the customer is asking for, instead of having them navigate and traverse through this complex menu, we can get to the heart of what they're asking for. And also, the other great thing about using conversational bots like this is that it also allows people to multitask instead of looking. So instead of listening to hear what the different menu options are from 1 to 0, and then having to push those buttons over and over again, you can just be on the phone, you can ask for what you want, and the bot can do the hard work of figuring out exactly what to do with your call. You can also use your bots to collect some basic information and pass that information along to your agent, even if this call is ultimately going to end up with an agent. And of course, when I'm saying call, I'm also speaking to channel. I'm being channel agnostic. That could also be chats that you're using LexBots for that may ultimately be routed for an agent. But there might be pieces of information that you could quickly collect using a LexBot that your agents are going to need in order to handle this customer. It gives a sense of moving the interaction along a bit more quickly for the customer, and it allows your agents to avoid having to ask those customers those repetitive questions about, what is your address, or what is your name, or, basic pieces of information that we really don't need our agents to reconfirm every single time, because it can become annoying for the customer. And then when we're thinking about how or why you might use Lex, we also need to consider how Lex would work with your Amazon Connect instance, because another thing to keep in mind is Amazon Lex is its own service, but you can connect a Lex bot in Amazon Connect simply by calling it from the specific contact flow block called Get Customer Input. From this block, you can find it very easily in your contact flow editor, and you can easily configure it to invoke an Amazon Lex bot instead of, let's say, collecting a DTMF input from your user. So it's super easy, very easy to configure. You simply add your Lex bot by reference, your contact flow seamlessly hands the conversation off to your LexBot. When your LexBot is finished with the interaction, it comes back to the contact flow with the information that it was able to ascertain, and then you can decide what you want to do with the conversation. If the LexBot did everything that needed to be done, you can end the conversation there. And if there is still some follow-up work that needs to be done, you can route the call further, either to an agent or to a different flow. This is where you can really see that native AWS integration between Lex and Amazon Connect, and the power of having everything in the same AWS ecosystem. Being able to configure this so easily makes it really nice, because you can set up your bot, you can easily add it to your instance, and then you can add it to your contact flow with a click of a button. Before we delve into some of our more advanced implementations and using code hooks with Amazon Lex, let's just quickly cover 3 concepts that you're going to come across when using Lex to build AI-powered experiences. And I'm just going to caveat this by saying that if you're not super familiar with Amazon Lex, but you are familiar generally with some machine learning concepts, these are generally pretty universal. So you're going to see these conversational elements quite frequently, even if you have used other AI-based products. The first concept that we're working with is the utterance. And true to its definition, the utterances are the actual words that your caller or chatter has to speak in order to trigger an action. So these are the words that your caller is using when they call or chat into your contact center. So we have an example of an utterance here. In our diagram below, you see that there is a person. Their utterance is, "I want a coffee." This person is saying, "I want a coffee." That's obviously a full sentence, but I will just say that utterances don't have to be complete sentences. They can be just a word or a phrase. It really is something that you can design your bot in terms of what utterances map to the second concept that you encounter when working with the Lex data model, which is intents. Now, intents are possible actions the caller may want to accomplish. So, you know, an utterance will map to your intent. And even though a caller may express this intent in many different ways, the intent is the actual action that needs to happen. So if we look at our diagram below, we have an intent called order coffee. So our Lexbot has an intent called order coffee. And in that intent, we would train our Lexbot to listen for certain sample utterances. And essentially, those utterances would then map to an intent, which would be the action that this person wants to perform. Now, the great thing when building Lexbots is that you do need to list some common phrases that the caller might say, but it doesn't have to include every or even most possible iterations of what that customer may say when they want to perform that intent. So, as an example, if we have an intent or action of ordering coffee, we may have many sample utterances that we train our bot to listen for, like, I want a coffee, I want a medium coffee, just the word coffee. There are a multiple range of ways that a customer may order a coffee. And we would want to train our bot to have certain sample utterances. But the important thing to know is that it doesn't have to be a complete list, although the more training phrases that you add or more utterances that you add, the stronger your bot is and the better able it is to handle those interactions. The other third concept that you see reflected in this diagram below is a slot. So a slot is a piece of information that will be used in the action the caller wants to take. So this is not a required piece of information. Your intent in your Lexbot could have 0 slots, or it could have more slots or parameters depending on what the nature of your intent is. You add the slots as part of the intent configuration, and then at runtime, Amazon Lex will prompt your customer or user for the specific slot values if they are required. The user must provide slot values for all required slots before Amazon Lex can treat that intent as being fulfilled. So in our example here, if someone was to call and try to order a coffee, I know that my coffee shop, we would need to know what type of coffee they want and what size of coffee they want. There are other values that we might think of as well that we might need to know, but generally those would be the 2 required pieces of information that I would need to know in order to be able to fulfill this intent and provide the customer with the coffee that they're seeking. So think of slots as the information that is required or optional in order for you to be able to fulfill the action that the customer is contacting you about. Now, the other concept that you've heard me mention a few times is Lambda. So let's quickly review AWS Lambda in a bit more detail. Now, for those of you who are more familiar with the AWS ecosystem, this is going to be old hat for you. I would say Lambdas are probably one of the most popular and well-used services in the AWS ecosystem. But for those of you who are less familiar with it, let's just have a quick introduction so you have a sense of what we're talking about when we refer to Lambdas. Lambdas are another AWS service that can enhance both your Amazon Connect and your Lex functionality. It is an optional service that you only use if needed, but I would honestly say that it's rare that I've worked on an implementation where we haven't at least used one Lambda. And that's because Lambdas run code in response to events. You can essentially focus on code and forget about managing servers. It's a great service. It's referred to as a serverless service, so you really don't have to worry about scaling or managing servers or resources. You can run these encapsulated bits of code in response to events without really having to think about all that provisioning and resourcing. Lambda often fills gaps If there's a service that AWS doesn't provide, you can often use Lambda to fill in that gap, or if you need information from some external system, you can use Lambdas to do that work for you. There's a saying that if something hurts, rub some Lambda on it. It's really one of those versatile services where you can really use to bridge between different services and make sure that they are able to perform the work they need to do. As I mentioned, the great thing about Lambdas is that they're serverless. You only need to worry about the code that needs to be run. You don't have to worry about the servers that underpin it. You only pay for the compute time you consume as well. There's no charge to have a Lambda deployed unless the code is running. It's charged based on the 100 milliseconds increments. So it's a very low cost, and a lot of Lambda functions execute in a fewer than 100 milliseconds. So you can get a lot out of this service. And I would also flag that there is a free tier for Lambdas, which is for every customer indefinitely. So you can get a lot out of this service just for free without having to really worry too much about underpinning servers or resources. Let's get started though with some specific tips for using Lambda with Amazon Connect and with Lex. So while you can certainly use Lambda outside of the contact center ecosystem, some things are very specific to how Amazon Connect works, and some things are more general, just things that you want to keep in mind when you're working with Lambda. The first important thing to always keep in mind is that Lambdas need permission to access whatever service you're integrating with. So for example, if your Lambda needs to retrieve some information from a database you need to provide that is stored on AWS, you would need to provide it with sufficient permissions to be able to read from that database. Likewise, if you're calling to a Lambda that's going to write to a database, it will need sufficient permissions to do that action. This plays into AWS and security. AWS is all about security. So you really want to give granular access to your Lambdas to only have access to the services that they absolutely need to be given access to. When working with Amazon Connect, you also need to make sure that Amazon Connect can call your Lambda. And that's generally true for any service that's calling your Lambda. But if Amazon Connect if you're going to be calling a Lambda from your contact flow, you need to make sure that Connect has sufficient permission to do so. Lambdas, as you may have gleaned by now, is that they really perform best if you're using them for short code pieces. Lambdas usually have a runtime execution limit on them. So, Lambdas execute and they return results. When writing code, you want to be mindful of this fact. When you're calling Lambdas from contact flows specifically, Amazon Connect gives you a timeout of 8 seconds. So while generally with Lambdas, you can have longer execution times that you can configure, if you're actually doing this in a contact flow, you have 8 seconds to get through the Lambda code and get a result back. Very important consideration, when you're working with APIs or any other services, you really want to make sure that your Lambdas are returning results quickly enough that they're not timing out. The other thing to keep in mind about Amazon Connect and Lambdas is that you can access payload information in the Lambda event object. So as I mentioned earlier, your Lambdas are going to be triggered in response to events. When a Lambda is triggered, there will be something called an event payload that becomes available to your Lambda. When it's from a contact flow, it may include information about the caller or the chatter and some basic information about the contact. It may also include some custom information that you're passing down to the Lambda. And the Lambda will receive all of this event payload in a JavaScript object notation or JSON format, which you can then use to essentially run your code. So these are, again, key value pairs of information that may be required for your Lambda to execute. Whenever Amazon Connect invokes Lambda, it will send this JSON payload with a lot of information about the caller, as well as any attributes that you may decide to set. But the same is also true if you are calling Lambdas from Lex. If you are calling Lambdas from Lex, it will include a payload, a JSON payload with key value pairs of information about the conversation, as well as some of the work that Lex has already done in terms of trying to figure out what the customer intent is and what the slots are. When a Lambda completes executing, you can return information back to the service that invoked it with information in the form of key value pairs. So again, that same JSON format, you execute your Lambdas with the JSON event payload, and then you return JSON objects as a result of the execution of the Lambda. Once we have a handle over these two basic concepts of, like the different parts of an Amazon Lex conversation, we can further extend Lex's capabilities using AWS Lambda functions. And what I mean by this is you can create functions that can then be used as code hooks that you can configure on your LexBot intents. And these code hooks can be used to enhance your customer experience. So beyond just the act of listening to what a customer has to say, understanding it, this functionality of being able to add code hooks allows you to extend the functionality of your bots and really enhance the conversational experience. There are a few different use cases that we're talking about when we're talking about different ways that code hooks can help enrich your conversation. One would be that it allows you to customize your interaction with the user. So let's say you need to do a data dip to retrieve information specific to the user and steer the conversation based on that information. This is something that you can use code hooks for. In our demo today, you will see us using Lambdas to validate user inputs to ensure that the user input does not violate any rules for ordering drinks from our barista bot. And if your bot is responsible for some sort of actionable conversation, in other words, some action will need to be taken in order to fulfill the customer's intent, Lambda functions are also necessary for that fulfillment. So the AWS documentation notes, quote, "Without a Lambda function, your bot returns the intent information to the client application for fulfillment." What that basically means is that when your LexBot identifies the intent that the customer is talking about, the kind of like the standard thing it does is that it just returns that intent and slot information back to the application that called it. So in other words, if you were calling your LexBot from a Amazon Connect contact flow, you would pass it off. Lex would try to understand what the customer is talking about. And then once it's ready to fulfill the intent, it's just going to return back the name of the intent and some of the slot information that it was able to collect from the customer. And if that's all you need, that's it. In some cases, you may just think, okay, if the intent has been detected correctly, I'm just going to hang up on the customer. And if the intent has not been detected correctly, I'm going to route this customer to an agent. So in this scenario, all you really need is the information that comes back from your LexBot in order to be able to branch the customer and move them forward. But thinking about our coffee shop example, if you need to create an order in a different application that's being used by your baristas, that's where code hooks would come in, because there is an actionable aspect of fulfilling this intent. Namely, once we understand that the customer is asking about ordering coffee, we actually need to put the coffee order through to our other system. So that's where code hooks come in, when we need to essentially fulfill our intent using other services. And we see a little bit of an extended diagram here. So in our first slide, we did see these three concepts, right? Utterance, intent, and then slot type. But we now see that with the use of our code hooks, we can validate against business rules, and then we can also do some fulfillment, which allows us to ultimately get our coffee orders to our coffee shop. So now we have a basic understanding of Lex and a basic understanding of Lambdas. Before we move on to talking about using Lambdas as code hooks, I want to add one more wrinkle to what we're talking about. And that is that in early 2021, AWS announced the release of a new enhanced Amazon Lex version 2 or V2 console and API. V2 of Lex offers some major improvements. I'm not going to get into a particularization of what those key difference and improvements are, but I've listed some of them here on this slide. Briefly, some of those improvements include being able to support multiple languages from the same bot. You also unlock some additional developer productivity tools and capabilities. If you have been developing with Lex, you'll be familiar with some of those pain points that you might have had in V1. V2 takes great strides in addressing some of those pain points for developers to make the whole thing, providing you with greater tooling to really develop these efficiently and create a great experience. With V2, we're also seeing new features being released. An example that's really cool is the automated chatbot designer, which was announced in preview in December 2021. If you haven't heard about this particular feature, it is a chatbot designer that's able to automatically generate bots based on chat transcripts that are inputted into it. So it's smart enough to be able to consume a whole bunch of conversations and develop a conversational bot based on those inputs. So very cool feature. It has only been announced for V2 right now. So again, a V2 is something for you to keep in mind because we're seeing some really neat and interesting enhancements being introduced. As I mentioned, I'm not going to get into all the particulars here. One thing I did want to flag for you is that AWS has a great migration guide for folks who are currently on V1 but want to move from V2. It provides some great guidance on what some of the V2 enhancements are and when you may want to consider migrating to V2 with your implementation. As I said, I'm not going to do a deep dive, but the impact on the rest of our presentation that I want you to keep in mind is that as far as code hooks go, many of the concepts are going to be similar, but two key differences that you're going to see when you're working with Lex V2 is that first, you configure and design your Lambdas a bit differently, and that's because of the changes to support multiple languages with the same bot. So you are defining your Lambdas slightly differently when you're working with V2. And the other thing to keep in mind when you're watching this presentation is that when you're working with V2, given some of the underlying data changes that happen between V1 and V2, the input coming into your Lambda and the response coming out of your Lambda when you're working with Lex will look a bit different. So these are two really important callouts that you want to keep in mind. The rest of our presentation will be focusing on showing you the V1 experience. And that's partly because Lex V2 bots are fairly new to the Amazon Connect ecosystem. But I did want to call out that as of last summer, Lex V2 bots can now definitely be integrated with your Amazon Connect contact center. So just keep this in mind. You do have two different options. We're primarily going to be showing you Lex V1 today. We are developing a separate bootcamp about the Lex V2 changes, as well as migration considerations and best practices. So if learning about V2 is something that you're interested in, please do let us know, and we can keep you advised about those about that programming as it becomes available. So moving on to the rest of our presentation to talk about code hooks. We talked about setting up Lambdas, which are encapsulated bits of code. And then we talked about our Lex intents. And when configuring a Lex intent in the AWS console, you'll be presented with the option to choose and set code hooks on the intent directly, which is the option that we're going to demonstrate to you today. If you're maintaining and creating your bots programmatically using APIs, the Lex model building API operations also have fields where you can define the code hooks that you want to use for a specific intent. When configuring a code hook, you can configure the Lambda in two possible places. So you have two configuration options, and the options are a dialog code hook or a fulfillment code hook. With dialog code hooks, the Lambda will be invoked with each user input if Amazon Lex understands the user intent. This makes this kind of code hook ideal for initialization and validation. So in other words, at this stage, Lex has just understood the intent. There may still be slots that need to be collected or additional information that still needs to be gathered from the customer. But this is where you would want to use the code hook if you want to do some either, if you want to like enhance the customer experience, or you just want to validate the input against certain business rules. Fulfillment code hook, as the name suggests, is only invoked after the user provides all of the slot data that is required to fulfill the intent. So again, think of it as coming at the tail end of your intent. And currently with V1, you can create separate Lambda functions for these different hooks. Now, again, going back to the caveats that I just introduced, there are some special considerations and limitations in this regard around how you work with Lambdas for V2. So definitely make sure that when you're looking at the documentation, it correlates to the version of LexBots that you're working with. But when you're working with Lex V1, you can either set up a single Lambda function to do both of your code hooks, or you can create separate Lambdas to do that work. When you have your triggering event for that Lambda, it does in that payload have a field called invocation source that will let you know if the Lambda is being triggered as part of a dialog code hook. So, earlier when the bot has just understood the intent, or if it's being triggered as part of the fulfillment code hook. And then you can use this trigger information to essentially compartmentalize your code. So if the invocation source is dialog code hook, I'm going to run this code. And if it's fulfillment code hook, I'm going to run this piece of the code. I've included a link to the documentation that Amazon provides with the input and the response formats. Again, this is the V1 documentation. We'll provide you with links to both the V1 and the V2 documentation. As I mentioned, the inputs and the responses will look a bit different depending on which version of Lex you're using. So although some of these concepts are the same, do keep that in mind when you're consuming the rest of this presentation. So if you plan to use Lambda functions as code hooks to extend your bot's capabilities, Amazon Lex expects a response in a very specific JavaScript object notation or JSON format. We're going to focus on the one required field today. There are 4 possible fields when you're working with Lex V1. The required field is dialog action, but there are the 3 other possible fields, all of which are optional, which I'm going to show here. Have a look at the link in the slide for more information about the optional fields and how they may be used to enhance your conversational experience. But the dialogue action field is what we're going to focus on today because it is what's required. And the reason it's required under Lex V1 bots is because it defines the next course of action for your Lex bot. So within this field, there is an attribute called type where you define what the next course of action will be. And this also drives what other fields are going to be required in your response that you're returning to your Lex bot. There are 5 different options for Lambda actions. So let's start talking about that. When you're returning this response from your code hook in your Lambda and you're returning the response to Lex, you can either tell Lex that you want to close. What this is telling Lex is that, you do not expect a further response from the user. We're going to go ahead and close this conversation. Another type of action that you can return is the confirm intent action. This is where you're telling Lex that we need a yes or no answer to confirm or deny the current intent. Let's say if we're not certain if we have matched the right intent and we just want to get that additional confirmation from the user. You also have the option to delegate what you are doing when you return a delegate action from your code hook is that you're directing Lex to choose the next course of action based on its configuration. You're going to see this in action in our demo today, where, you know, if certain business rules are satisfied, what we're essentially going to tell Lex to do is continue the conversation based on how it's configured. We're kind of going to hand things back to Lex to kind of steer the conversation to the next step. You can also tell Lex that you want the user to respond with an utterance that actually includes an intent, or you can also return a elicit slot action, which is asking the user to provide a slot value because we need that in order to move forward with this intent. So these are the range of actions that you can return from your Lambda function to your LexBot. And again, these are just directions for your LexBot on what needs to happen next. And in addition to this action information, you may have to provide some additional values in order for Lex to be able to continue with the conversation. So let's pause here and quickly talk about our coffee shop example that we looked at earlier. Right, we had our LexBot and it was being trained to listen for coffee orders. And here we have a bit more of an elaborate diagram to show you where Lambdas can provide value when you're using dialog code hooks. So at the very top here, you see I have an utterance. It says, I want a large espresso. And it is mapping to our LexBot intents of order coffee. And on our intent, we have configured a dialog code hook, which is going to get triggered every time Lex is able to identify a user intent. So our dialog code hook gets triggered, which is a Lambda function. And in our Lambda function, we have all of these business rules that we are basically checking the customer's input for. So you'll see that if in this function, we see that the customer is asking about a type of coffee product that our particular coffee shop does not sell. For instance, I've used an example here of cold brew. We're going to elicit a slot from the customer of coffee. We're going to tell them, hey, you know, that type of coffee you're trying to order is not available, but we're going to suggest a popular drink to them, and we're going to ask them to provide a type of coffee that we actually can sell to them. Similarly, we have some size restrictions in our business rules here. You'll see that if a customer tries to order something other than a small, medium, or large coffee, we want to re-prompt them for a correct size. We want to let them know that, hey, we only sell small, medium, and large. So if you're trying to order an extra large, that's not going to work. We're going to stop there, and we're going to ask the customer to provide an input that we can actually turn into a real order. Similarly, on some of our drinks like cappuccinos or lattes or Americanos, we only have certain sizes available. So again, in these scenarios, we're going to return a response that's going to elicit a slot of size, and we're going to let the customer know, hey, that size is not available for this particular coffee product. These are the sizes that are available. And then you see this little green arrow here. If all of our business rules are satisfied and none of these get caught here, all we're going to do is delegate back to the bot. Boss was a Freudian slip there because ultimately the LexBot is the boss here, but we're going to delegate things back to the bot, and we're going to tell the bot like, hey, no business logic was failed. Go ahead and proceed with your next configure step. And in our scenario here, what the LexBot is designed to do is that it's going to confirm the order, and presuming the customer says yes, we're going to go ahead and put the order through. So this really shows you how you can use code hooks to really apply some business rules. And then we also see here our fulfillment code hook example. So if, let's say, all the business rules have been met, we have passed the validation, and the customer says yes to confirm the coffee type and size, this is where, once we have all of our slots and we're ready to proceed, our fulfillment code hook is going to get triggered. And so in our example today, you know, once we have the order, we could return it just to Amazon Connect, right? And Amazon Connect is going to be able to, let's say, figure out if we were able to get the order for the customer, and based on that, route to an agent or not, right? So that information will be helpful for our client application, namely Connect. But In our scenario here, we also need to put an order through to a different application in order for our barista to know that an order has come in and fulfill it. So what we're going to show you is we have a fulfillment code hook configured that's going to point at a Lambda. And what our Lambda is going to do is create an entry in a Amazon DynamoDB table. Now, if you're not familiar with DynamoDB, don't get too fixated on it. It's Amazon's NoSQL database service. It's excellent. It's another serverless service that scales automatically, provides you with the ability to create NoSQL databases that can hold data. We're just showing this to you as an example of how in your fulfillment code hook, you can trigger events or take steps in other systems that can then generate activity in whatever applications you're building. So in our example here, we're going to drop our order into our DynamoDB table. And the theory is that our other applications would then be able to pick that DynamoDB entry and create a order for our baristas. So with that in mind, and with this coffee order logic introduced to you, I'm going to pass it over to Rishi to show us some of these ideas of using code hooks in action, and I will pass over to him.
Alrighty. So hello again. I hope you're enjoying the Lex portion of our workshop. I'll go ahead and demonstrate to you some of the Lex concepts Umair discussed earlier. What you see here on my screen is the AWS Management Console. We're going to start by searching for the LexBot service here in our console. So let's go ahead and type Amazon Lex. You see here it pops up. And we see here a list of bots that we have in our instance. Let's go ahead and search. Oh, actually ours is actually right here. We're going to go ahead and click that. And boom, on your screen here, you now see our LexBot console. So what we're looking at here actually is a barista bot that we pre-configured. As Umair discussed earlier, there are three main building blocks relevant to every LexBot. These are intents, utterances, and slots. An intent represents an action that the user wants to perform. So if you can see here on our left-hand side of our screen, we have this intents table, and we have right now selected our coffee order intent. So you can think of intent as pretty much the action or the intention of the user of who accesses your bot essentially, and what they would like to do. So that kind of is the gist of intents. You create a bot, of course, to support one or more related intents. In this example, we're covering an intent to cover the coffee order. Utterances, on the other hand, are precisely how a user might convey this intent. So if you can see here on my screen, we see spoken or typed phrases that invoke your intent. And we have a list of about 10 here, and we can add infinitely as many as we'd like. So we here see, I want a size coffee. I want a size coffee type. I want a coffee type. I want a size, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just varying phrases, exact precise strings that the Amazon's NLP will be trying to parse and look for. So you can probably see here, we have two, both a green and a blue colored word, you could say, inside of some curly brackets. And that is for our size, and that is for our coffee type. So that brings me to our third and final element, or building block rather, that are slots, which essentially are basic pieces of information that are needed to fulfill a user's order. Here we've created two slot data types, as you can see, size and coffee type. And quickly scrolling down here, you can see these here. We have the coffee type one denoted and highlighted in blue, and we have our size denoted in green. So as we mentioned, or as Umair mentioned earlier, slots can be marked required or optional. If you mark a slot as required and the user doesn't provide the slot, the bot will respond with a message or prompt. And in our case, the prompt is what kind of coffee, as you can see here, following some sort of other preceding or proceeding statement to get or to say what type of coffee are actually available. As you can see here in this required field that I have highlighted, we have this checkbox enabled for both. And that tells Lex that, hey, these two slots are required. These two fields of data type, in this example, coffee type and size, are required pieces of information to be uttered by our user. So as you can see here, we also have some slot types. We have the coffee types slot type, and we also have the coffee size type. So let's go ahead and look into these a bit more. And this, of course, can be found, as you just saw, in the slot types left sidebar. So we are now here in our coffee size, and we have a brief description of what this is. Size of coffee is available. we expand these values, and the values we have here are pretty much a list of values that are being looked for, or that are actually available here. And these are encoded. So we have we have three here. We have our small, we have our large, and we have our medium, typical sizes in a coffee shop. These values, of course, can be tailored to your custom use case in whatever industry you're in, such that your business logic and, of course, your bot pertains specifically to your domain. So, of course, we already have added this slot to our intent, but actually, we wouldn't click that button. But if you wanted to, if you're configuring this from scratch, you would go ahead and add the slot to the intent. So we're going to exit out of that. And we're also going to go ahead and look at our coffee types. Same will apply. We have our description, slot resolution, and we also have our values here. So this time around, you see we have our 4 different types of coffee offered. We have espresso, cappuccino, Americano, and latte. So of course, we can configure these slots with values that Amazon's underlying NLU and ML can recognize. So that is essentially the reasoning and significance behind doing this. So, and of course, as Umair mentioned earlier, and I'm going to get into this further along in the demo, in this console, we have the ability to click this arrow, and we have the Lambda initialization and validation, and B, our fulfillment here, with 2 associated checkboxes / radio buttons. I want you to focus here on the Lambda initialization and validation. This is precisely where we would initialize and hook in a validation code hook. And of course, the whole reason for this is to apply our business logic, as Umair discussed earlier. And also, we have our fulfillment radio button here, where we can either choose a Lambda function, which of course is another AWS service where you can deploy a language of your choice, any code in a serverless environment, or we can go ahead and return these parameters to the client. This is exactly how you see the bot configured, and this kind of is the out-of-the-box functionality of Lex. And I want to actually go ahead and demo to you a very simple bot interaction without any of these code hooks enabled. So in order to do this, of course, once you have the basics configured, you would want to go ahead and hit this build button here you see next to publish. This exactly will build your bot so you can test it. And we're going to go ahead and click build. And Amazon Lex is currently building our bot, as you can see by this rotating arrow. You see now our bot has been, our build is complete. And now we have 2 views here. We have our test bot, which is where we can interact with our bot. And we also see below an inspect response section. I want to really highlight this inspect response section here, because this is precisely how you can test what state your bot's in. And pretty much this, of course, is very essential to any testing purpose to see how your bot is responding to the lambdas that you've hooked in. Of course, now we haven't hooked in any lambdas, but you'll see by hooking in the lambda, our behavior is pretty affected directly here, and different states will not be met and different states will be put into. So that kind of, we will actually see this as we go along. And what I'm going to do here in this portion of the demo is I will order a large Americano coffee. The bot will be able to understand I'm trying to order a coffee. And if I don't provide one of the 2 required slots, it will prompt me to provide it since we've marked it as required. I'd like you to focus your attention here now, where I'm going to go ahead and do this. I would like to order a coffee. As you can see here, we're prompted with this response. And of course, the precise reason why we responded with this is because all we've done here is say that we would like to order a coffee. And as you can see in this testing window, we have a dialog state that we are, of course, 1 of 5 options. We are here now in the illicit slot state. Under that, we can see the intent that was hit, which is our coffee order intent. And under that, you see the slots, which we have currently provided 0 of 2. We have both slots that the required slots we've defined, which are coffee type and size, both as no, as you would expect, because we have not told Lexbot what size coffee would like or what type coffee would like. So we see here our prompt, which of course we saw down here. And let's go ahead and say Americano. As you can see now, we are still in the illicit slot dialog state, but now you can see an updated counter here where our coffee type data type value has been filled with Americano, since that is exactly what we provided here. And also you see size is still no, hence why we're actually still in this illicit slot state. So that is why we go ahead and get the second prompt. What size of coffee would you like to order? we have small, medium, and large. Let's go ahead and type in large. So are you sure you want to order a large Americano? Now you see we are in the confirm intent dialog state, which of course is one of the 5. And this is exactly where a user would be able to confirm their intent, intuitive as it sounds. So let's go ahead and say, yes, I would like to order this coffee. And boom, we see here our response. And this is honestly is exactly what this behavior is expected, because specifically because we have not selected a fulfillment lambda. We currently have this set to return parameters to client, hence why we get this message back from the client. Now I'm going to get into the fulfillment part of this a bit later, but I've just shown you some of the basic capabilities of LexBot. Let's now see how we can further enhance this bot for our particular business use case. If a user interacts with our LexBot, we will not be able to steer our potential customer in the right direction without the use of validation code hooks. In this example, we have set up a customized validation code hook to let our customers know we don't have certain sizes of coffee. In order to impose this business logic, we can hook in a Lambda function. Specifically, what we're hooking in is called a validation code hook. The goal of using validation code hooks is to implement additional business logic pertaining to our particular use case. That is the main significance behind implementing and configuring validation code hooks. So that, of course, is all relevant to this particular checkbox here, where we'll go ahead and initialize and validate or add this Dropbox to, we're going to add this initialization and validation code hook simply by clicking this button here. So I will now go ahead and type in or look for our Lambda function that we've already pre-deployed. So this, of course, in the backend is written in JavaScript. I'm not going to get too into the weeds of the code here in the interest of time, but we will go ahead and select this Lambda that we've configured. So we have deployed this function. As far as version or alias, we have chosen latest here. You and your business use case would probably want to choose either latest or the latest tested version that is stable. Of course, we don't want to use any. It would be better for you to use a stable version, and we have tested this to be the latest. So now we're going to go ahead and with this checked and with all of these details configured, we're going to go ahead and rebuild our bot. And this, of course, is very essential when you're going ahead and test these code hooks, because without building again, you will still see the same response. So make sure you go ahead and click that build button. And now, while actually this is building, I want to quickly refer back to the image that Umair was discussing previously. So now, as you can see here, we have this Lambda function in the middle of our dialog code hook. We have our validate coffee order method here, which essentially is written in JavaScript, as I mentioned, in the backend. And our utterance here is, I want a large Americano. We see the flow of this. And now we're going to go ahead and do that same, we're going to go ahead and say that same message that we did previously, where we want a large Americano. And now we will observe the behavior. But just for a quick visual guide, this is the block here that we are in. And we'll see that we're going to be in our illicit slot a bit longer. So let's go ahead and see if, awesome, that our build has been successful. So let's now go ahead and order that same coffee. I would like to order a coffee. You see here we're prompted in the same fashion that we were previously in the same dialog state. Let's go ahead and type in Americano. Filled as expected. Our coffee type is Americano here. Now let's go ahead and type in large. So if you remember previously, before I hit enter, this actually brought us to our confirm intent state, dialog state, and the size was filled. But what have we done here differently? We have actually hooked in our validation. So let's go ahead and observe the behavior. Boom. You see here that 2 of 2 slots have been filled, Americano and large. However, we are still in the illicit slot dialog state, whereas previously we were actually in the confirm intent state. This is precisely because of the validation code hook that we have now configured and added to this LexBot. And of course, we see the message that we've configured here. We do not have Americano in that size. Medium is the available size for that drink. So you can kind of see here how we essentially are steering our customer interaction in a way that is fit for our business. And so, of course, now as a customer, I would know, okay, they do not offer large. Let's go ahead and order something within the bounds of the menu. Let's order medium. And now you see here, our medium is our size. Everything is filled, 2 of 2. And we are no longer in the listed slot dialog state. We're actually in the confirm intent. because precisely that this response was within bounds of our business logic. So let's go ahead and confirm this intent. And boom, you see here, our dialog state is ready for fulfillment. And we have the same response here previously. I've just shown, so now moving on a bit to the second of two possible customers or enhancements. We will see here, I've just showed you how one of the possible enhancements. I'd like to now discuss the second option, which regards fulfillment code hooks. Right now, as you can see, when completing our interaction with the bot, we see a final response to conclude the interaction. These parameters are significant because once a coffee has been ordered, we want the order to be saved for further processing. We don't want our valued customer's order to just evaporate into thin air. Instead, we probably want to keep a record of this order by saving our order in some database and either linking it to some UI, which reads and displays the order for an actual barista on premises to go ahead and fulfill the order manually, or create some backend application which reads and processes this order. Luckily for us, this can be done right in the AWS ecosystem using Amazon DynamoDB. DynamoDB is a fully managed serverless key-value NoSQL database designed to run high-performance applications at any scale. So as you can see here, this exactly are the parameters that I'm talking about. Of course, you can see this is not a very clean user experience. And from a UX standpoint, we would want our customers rather to be responded to with a message of confirmation that they can actually understand. This is actually kind of gibberish to a customer. So let's go ahead and enhance this. We're going to go ahead to our fulfillment section here. We see that the reason we're getting this behavior, of course, is because we've returned the parameters to our client. Let's go ahead and change that. Click the AWS Lambda function radio button. Now this brings us to a Lambda function dropdown. Let's go ahead and pick our Lambda as we did before. So I want to make a quick note here before I select this. We actually have our fulfillment and our validation hooked to the same Lambda. This is one architecture pattern that you could have. You could also have separate Lambdas for separate fulfillment or validation. The choice is yours. We just have it configured here where 1 for 2. So we have our Lambda here. We have the version here as latest, of course. And now let's go ahead and build our bot one more time. You see here, our bot is building. Now, quickly, while this is building, I would like to go back to the other image that Umer referred to previously. Now we see here, we are in our validation state. We say under yes, the user says yes to confirm our coffee type and size. Prior, we had our parameters written to us. Now we have hooked in our fulfillment code hook. And now this will hit AWS Lambda that I just selected. And then that will go ahead and place those orders into this database. And that is done via, of course, JavaScript again. And I will not be getting too into the depth of the code, but that, of course, is using AWS Lambda and DynamoDB rather. So now let's go ahead back to our Lex console. We see our bootcamp bot has been completed. So let's go ahead and utter the same response we have done throughout this demo. I would like to order a coffee. You see here, same prompt, same deal. Let's go ahead and say Americano. We see what sizes of coffee you would like. Let's go ahead and click large, just to reiterate our past point. You see, wow, our validation is still working, of course, precisely because we have this still checked. And now let's go ahead and say yes. Oh, no, sorry. Let's go ahead and say medium. You see our slots are filled. We are in the confirm intent state. Let's go ahead and type in yes. Now, before I hit enter, of course, previously we had that gibberish reiterated back to us by the Lex bot. Now let's go ahead and observe the behavior that we've configured this fulfillment with. We say yes here. And now we see this message. Thank you. Your order has been placed. So of course, we do not see that gibberish before. And now we have saved this order for our database. Now I would like to quickly show you this in another tab here. How I got here actually is by clicking or typing rather DynamoDB. And then once I did that, it would bring us to this section of the management console. I went ahead and clicked tables. Then I went into explore items of our particular table and interest here. Now you see 0 items. Let's go ahead and refresh this page. And boom, you see now we have one order in this database. And that is precisely the order that I just placed. We have our Americano drink, our medium size, a hashed value for user ID, and a hashed order ID. And this, of course, will scale just as Amazon's infrastructure has powered it. So Now, let's see here. So we've created our bot. It understands our user wants to order a coffee. We have our code hook for business logic enabled, and our fulfillment code hook saves orders to a DynamoDB. Now we're ready to put this in front of our customers. Let's make this public facing and embed it into Amazon Connect. There are 2 steps to make this happen. First, we must embed our Lexbot into a contact flow. And second, let's test this in a chat widget inside Amazon Connect. So if you would bring your attention here to my screen now, you see we're back in Amazon Connect. How I got here, of course, is in the same routing tab inside contact flows, except now we are in a different contact flow than the one we saw previously. Now you can see here, I would like to focus your attention on the get customer input block here. So here we have a pre-configured contact flow. I've already dealt with the permissions here, so we can easily add the Lexbot to our contact flow. I'd like you to focus your attention, of course, here. If a customer calls or messages into our contact flow, they will be able to seamlessly have their interaction handled by Lexbot. Once the Lexbot has completed the interaction, we will be able to see the intent that was recognized and branch off from there. So quickly before I get into that, just to how to configure this block, we have a simple text-to-speech or chat text. We've entered welcome to our virtual coffee ordering service. What would you like to order? And now rather, I'd like you to focus your attention here where we now can select our Lexbot. And of course, we have our Lexbot that we've already configured. And excuse me, we have our alias as latest here. And of course, we see our intent here, our coffee order intent. So we're going to go ahead and hit save, of course, on this. So now you can kind of see the branch off and the logic here. I don't want to get too into depth of this contact flow, but you can see that if our coffee order bot intent was understood, we have an arrow pointing to this play prompt block that pretty much says, thanks for placing your order. If not, we see 2 options here. We either have a default or an error. We're going to send this to a set working queue. And this would be for further processing or for an agent to handle. Oh, not for further processing, for exactly an agent to handle. So that exactly is how this is configured. And that is essentially how the step 1 of enabling this in your contact flows.
Yeah,
now,
great. That's a great comment there, Rishi. And just to iterate that point, we saw that when Rishi was configuring the fulfillment, you either had the options to either return the parameters to your client application or trigger a Lambda function code hook for fulfillment. What it means when it says return those parameters to your client application in this context is that Lex would just return the information about the intent and the slots back to your contact flow. And what Rishi is showing here is you're able to branch based on that intent information or those slots. So in other words, what Rishi is showing there is that if our bot was not able to map the customer's input here to a coffee order and the customer is calling about something else, we have the ability based on that information that's returned from your Lexbot to route the customer to an agent instead of just, saying, hey, all good, feel free to head to your coffee shop, we're good to go. So that's where that information that's returned back to your client application is useful. And the fulfillment step is if you need to do some other actionable step that's outside of your contact flow or outside of this application to fulfill that order.
Thank you for clarifying, Umair.
Thanks so much, Rishi.
So now, no problem. So now that brings us to the final portion of this demo. So I've showed you how to enable our Lexbot into a contact flow. Let's now test this Lexbot in the Amazon Connect UI to understand its behavior. Amazon Connect allows you to easily test your chat widget inside your Amazon Connect instance. So as you can see here, we see the Amazon Connect UI. Let's go ahead and in this Explore Your Channels of Communication segment, we're going to go ahead and click Test Chat here. That brings us to this test chat window. The first step of being able to test this essentially is going to test settings here. Now we have our contact flow that we would like to test. We of course have this coffee ordering for the purpose of Lex demo. You can optionally configure some contact attributes. We of course do not have this configured currently. We also can tamper with some of the customer names, etc., etc. We have not done that either. We just want to understand the behavior for the purpose of this demo. So let's go ahead and click apply here. And as soon as we hit apply, we see a chat window has popped up. So now we see our same bot, except now we're in the Amazon Connect user interface, which kind of shows the seamlessness of connecting Amazon Lex to Amazon Connect. So let's go ahead and do the same thing. I would like to order a coffee. As you can see, the responses are the same. Let's go ahead and type in Americano. We see what size of coffee would you like to order. Let's go ahead and type in medium because we already know that's within bounds. Are you sure you want to order a medium Americano? Let's go ahead and click yes and confirm our intent. We see our order has been placed. We see a system message and we see the chat has ended. So we'll go ahead and close that here. And to quickly show how this is still connected to our DynamoDB in the backend, let's go ahead and refresh this. And now you can see we have 2 items. And now we have a duplicate order, Americano drink with medium size, with of course a different hashed user ID and a different order ID, precisely showing how both Amazon Connect UI and Lexbot still end up dumping this data or this fulfillment data into the same database on the backend. So with that pretty much concludes our Lex portion of the demo. Thank you for joining. I'll go ahead and kick it back to Amir as we wrap up this portion of our bootcamp.
Thanks for that excellent presentation on Lexbots. I'm sure we covered a lot of information there. I did see some great questions popping up in the chat, so please keep those coming. Laura, are there any that I have missed that we should take up now?
I don't think so. I think we got to all of them, but if we did miss your question, please feel free to put it back in the chat, and I apologize for that. Several of you have been direct messaging me your contact information for me to get back in touch with you in the future for our future workshops. Feel free to keep doing that. At the end of the presentation, we'll also have our contact us email so that you or link so that you can email us and let us know you're interested, or you, like I said, you can just direct message it to me now. But yes, looks like we've got a couple other questions coming in.
Okay, great. Let me have a look. Audrey, we answered your question. What kind of workforce management or quality management tools do you use for implementations, as Amazon Connect doesn't provide that out of the box? Great question. I would also say it's a loaded question. You can do a lot of integrations with Amazon Connect and different WFM products like Calabrio. It is usually a custom thing. I would, our director of our practice, Mattia, is in this room. Matt, do you want to speak to this and what options are usually available?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, pretty much, you mentioned Calabrio. We integrate with Calabrio, Nice, and many other workforce management tools. Basically, you can integrate with any one of those that has a potential integration API. Usually it's a REST API. Usually it's an integration that's fairly simple by having Lambda taking multiple contact trace records and dumping it into an S3 bucket, and then creating another integration point that sends that information into the workforce management. Of course, there's a potential problem about the expected payload. If you just dump raw data, who's going to filter it? Is it the workforce management, or do we do some sort of a light ETL process in the cloud with multiple AWS services in order to complete the integration? Hopefully that helps, but if you need more information, just let me know.
Great. Thanks, Matt, for answering that question so well. Imran had a great second question as well. How are you handling DevOps processes for Amazon Connect, like moving all the contact flows and other AWS components? A very loaded question, but a great one. So there are 2 aspects here that you need to think about. There's, of course, the Amazon Connect instance and the resources within it. And then you may also have AWS resources that are used by your Amazon Connect instance, like Lambdas or Lexbots. So this could be, I would say, a topic of discussion that we could literally spend a full day on because of the level of complexity. But how I would answer it in a more kind of like high level way is to tell you that for your AWS resources, there is an AWS service called CloudFormation, which is effectively support for your deployment as code. So you can actually write CloudFormation templates that sum up all the resources that you want to create and then run those as part of your CI/CD pipelines. On the Amazon Connect side, the ability to programmatically deploy is something that is an emerging feature. Recently, Amazon added CloudFormation support for contact flows, but there are also some APIs that Amazon makes available, the Amazon Connect APIs, that you can use to interact with Amazon Connect and create those resources programmatically. That support for CloudFormation and contact flows is relatively new. So, we are actually internally still working through that. We're working with customers to build tooling using CloudFormation, that new ability with CloudFormation. So really you're looking at either the CloudFormation option for contact flows or the APIs for Amazon Connect if you're looking to create resources programmatically. I would definitely dig into those areas. And to your question about how do you currently move Amazon Connect components currently, are you doing it manually or some other way? Really depends on the customer. Some of our customers use, develop custom tooling using the CloudFormation approach or the API approach that I just discussed. Others chose to go a more manual way where they, export the contact flow and then import it manually into the target contact center. In your contact flows, there is a button to the top right corner that provides you with the ability to export your contact flow as a JSON configuration. And then you can very easily take that one JSON configuration file and import it into your target environment. When you're doing this using the console, if there are resources that were in your source environment, but are not in your target environment, it will also show you little alerts. So for instance, if you need to update queue names in your flow before publishing it, it will prompt you for that. And so generally it's a mix right now when you're working with Amazon Connect of manual deployment, but then we're also seeing customers trying to move towards using the more programmatic options that are available. I hope that answered your question. Again, I could go on about deployment for a whole day, so don't get me started, but that would be your very high level answer. Did anyone use Sierra for load testing Amazon Connect? I can't say that I have. Mattia, would you, I might defer to you because I think you may have some visibility into other projects.
The answer is no, we have not used that one for load testing with Connect. No.
Okay, great. And I see another question that's popped up here about, I would like to understand how to best get Lex performance and customer journey analytics pre-queue. So those are two separate things. Pre-queue analytics, there are a few different ways to do it. You can either set contact attributes at various stages of the contact and then use those contact attributes as part of your reporting. With Lex, there's a whole other bunch of metrics that you can extract. Might be a topic that we may want to take offline, Nick. So maybe we can plan to have a conversation about that separately, but it's a whole other world for sure. Great questions so far. Any other questions about our Lex presentation today?
I love the questions that are coming in. I don't know if anyone has any questions about sort of implementing the types of logic we showed today in your industry. You've got questions about that. Oh, another one.
Oh, let me take this one, Amir. I wrote some of the blog posts on this one as well. What are our insights around Amazon Connect integration with Salesforce via the CTI adapter versus using it with the Salesforce Service Cloud voice? Those are two different things, and it depends how you want to approach your CRM strategy. First question is, where do you want the calls to be answered? If it's within CRM, great. Both of those will provide you with the same option. Second one is, well, are you interested in having an omni-channel experience? Now, when it comes to omni-channel word and omni-channel in different systems, they have different meaning. Omni-channel in Salesforce, they refer to their digital channels. flowing through Salesforce. Omnichannel in general, it's a concept where users and callers can put in their request through various channels and still maintain the context of that conversation. So if you're an agent, you got a phone call, and later on somebody uses a web chat or an SMS or WhatsApp, the context of that conversation stays with the agent, so you don't have to repeat yourself. If you go with the Service Cloud Voice, you get that. If you go with the CTI adapter, you now have two separate channels within Salesforce. And also, I'll finish with the last one is cost. If you want per usage model, CTI adapter gives you that option. If you go with Service Cloud Voice, then it's a licensing model. So like Umair likes to say, it's a loaded question. It depends. I keep saying that depends, and I was just commenting with Laura the other day how I hate that word. It looks like I'm avoiding the question, but it honestly depends on the requirements.
Great answer. Thanks so much for providing that context, Matt. I really appreciate it. If there are no other questions or people are still thinking of them, maybe Laura, we can move on to the next slide. And then if anyone does think of any additional questions in the next few minutes, please feel free to ask them. We're here for you. We're here to answer any questions you may have. So we'll stick around. And Laura, I'm going to move on to the next slide here so we can cover some of our wrap up.
Yeah, I can do this one if you'd like.
Sure.
So yeah, in here's the link to the administrator guide. I also put this link in the chat earlier, and it will be on the handout that we are sending you all. But it is, as Umair showed you, it is comprehensive, well organized. It's got a lot of further documentation in it. And this last bullet is the one that we like to emphasize a lot in all of our workshops. Is that we can't know everything, even though the folks here at Proficient have been working with Amazon Connect and the AWS ecosystem for a long time. There's still questions that come up that we don't always know the answer to, and so knowing where to look and staying resilient and dogged in your determination to find answers is really key.
That's great. And someone in the chat had asked about whether we do other programming like this. So at Proficient, we are planning future bootcamp offerings on topics like voice ID, wisdom, tasks, and also Lex V2. So if that is something you're interested in, please do let us know, and we can make sure that we provide you with the information about those offerings as they become available. Do stay in touch with us, and we can make sure that we can continue to provide you with those resources. My slides are a bit out of order here, but our last slide here is a thank you. Again, we still do have a few minutes for any additional questions. I do see some coming in here. Let me just take a quick look. I see that Matya was able to answer the question about campaign management. What would be a best practice to create the actual verbiage in Lex, such as the coffee shop situation? My industry is financial management. Where would we start to create these conversations? Where would we start to create these conversations? So when you say create the actual verbiage in Lex, you mean creating the bot. And so what you would do if you're trying to, so let's say your industry is financial management, Lexi, you would be setting up a bot, and then you would be setting up intents on that bot that are trained to listen for sample utterances. So the coffee shop example was just one example, but in your industry, you would want to think about what are the specific intents that we want our bot to be able to serve, and then work backwards from there. So we really start off by thinking about your possible intents for your bot, and then you start thinking about what the utterances are that you may want to train the bot to listen for in order to map to that intent. So that's kind of the development flow you're going for. Obviously, the coffee shop situation was a specific example, but depending on what your industry is, you would think about what your customers are likely to ask about. You would figure out what the core intent is there. Then you would think about what your customers may say in order to get to that intent, and then you would design your bot on that basis. I know that sounds a bit daunting. A feature that I had highlighted that I just wanted to make a callback to is that AWS with Lex v2 has also enabled you to use an automated chatbot creation tool. So you're able to feed transcripts into this tool and create bots using that input. So it's meant to kind of simplify some of this development work that needs to happen to create your bots. So that might be also something that you look into as a follow-on. Great. I don't see any outstanding other questions here, Laura, so I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. So you will receive from AWS a follow-up email, I think tomorrow, that will have this PowerPoint deck in it and a handout that we've created with the links, and then an evaluation form, if you could please fill out. And then it will also give you that link I just put in the message, the generic contact us link, so you can use that to connect with us, or you can direct message me your email if you want to make sure that we put you on our list for the future. Any other last questions from folks? I do want to really thank you all for your time this afternoon. I know that was a long few hours, but I hope that the information that we gave you and my expert presenters, Rishi and Umair, helped inspire you, gave you some new insights and some new ideas to bring back to your decision makers and to your team to help you really improve the customer service experience with your business using Amazon Connect.